Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we are usually going week to week, watching a television show, breaking it down, analyzing it, sharing that week-to-week experience with you, and providing context and some recommendations along the way. But not today. Today, I will be breaking down my list of around 20, I'm cheating again, so 20 some odd favorite films of the year of 2025, along with a conversation with Darren catching up on films he's been watching during the holiday season, including one which is on my list of favorite films of the year, Bugonia, which has just premiered on Peacock. Here in the United States, I'm not sure how it's available around the world or how widely Peacock is available around the world, but definitely available as a rental. And if you do have Peacock here in the US, if you did pick it up for that super cheap subscription around the holidays, which I think is still available. So once again, if you want to subscribe to Peacock, Bugonia has just premiered there about a week ago at this point. Starting this week, we go back to our usual format of covering shows week to week. And in this is a kickoff of a new season for our podcast here, just a mini season, a few months long. And in this short season, we will be checking in with Amazon Prime's Fallout, which is currently airing. We begin our coverage of The Pit Season 2 this very week. Sona and I will be watching some of His and Hers, a new mystery thriller premiering on Netflix this very week. The Night Manager Season 2 is premiering on Amazon Prime. Industry, Darren and I will be discussing Industry in this very slot 1 week from today, discussing the fourth season of Industry on HBO. Sona and I will be going week to week on the series Hijack, Season 2 with Idris Elba, the Apple TV series. And we'll be checking in with Night of Seven Kingdoms, the new Game of Thrones spinoff, watching Drops of God, a series that have been recommended by listeners for us to watch here on the podcast, also on Apple TV. Darren and I will definitely be checking in, at least the pilot episode of The Beauty, the new sci-fi horror series from Ryan Murphy. There's Wonder Man. There's a new adaptation of The Burbs featuring Keke Palmer, or starring Keke Palmer. And all of that even before we get to Paradise Season 2 and the new Guy Ritchie adaptation, Young Sherlock Holmes. So tons of stuff to watch. Is it worth watching or not? Do you want a listening companion? Subscribe to our podcast and we'll keep you in the loop. Also stay tuned for an announcement in the near future where I will be launching our Patreon, some conversations I already have pre-recorded. And that'll probably be the place where I'll go to have deeper dives into some of the movies I'm watching, since there's really not enough room to cover all of them here in the TV coverage. It's still not too late if you want to shout out something for the year, something that you think people should be watching. Oh, I do want to call out, a couple of you have reached out to me with some recommendations, and I do want to shout them out because they are blind spots for me. First, from Ian in New York, a recommendation of Alpha Males, which I definitely wanted to bring up for the fact that A, completely in my blind spot, apparently a Spanish language comedy series about these 40-ish men navigating this new cultural landscape, something I can definitely appreciate. And from the little I've seen of it, a satire of this kind of macho posturing, and of course also a satire of this new cultural moment we're in. And easily available on Netflix, very popular apparently overseas or maybe everywhere. And there have been adaptations in French, in German, quite a few different languages. So it's interesting that this has basically become an international format for this comedy series. But most importantly of all is that the fourth season, I believe this is the fourth of an ongoing season. I don't think it's the last. It'll probably be, I guess it's still very successful. Fourth season is premiering this very week on Netflix. So if you want to catch up on it, half-hour episodes, more or less. So it should be pretty quick to watch. 3 seasons currently available, and the fourth premiering this very week. So thank you, Ian, for the recommendation. And one more recommendation from Judy, another show that I have definitely heard of, had rave reviews when it came out. I think because of COVID, had a significantly delayed second season, and I think is no longer renewed at this point, but available on Peacock. Once again, another Peacock recommendation, a series called We Are Lady Parts. And this is a story about a group of Muslim women who start a punk rock band, and I assume really break the gender mold for given their backgrounds. And it's supposed to be very funny and have great music. So, and very highly rated, by the way, even on IMDb among fans and as well as among critics. So something I have not watched, but I remember when season 1 came out, a lot of rave reviews, and have never watched any of it. So maybe something to put in my backlog of unwatched good material for this year. Maybe we'll have some section over time where I'm catching up on things that I missed along the way. Kind of hard to stay on top of everything, obviously. Part of the reason I reach out to all of you to ask for recommendations of things to watch, especially if they're short. There's not a ton of episodes of this show, by the way. So especially if it's something I could catch up on relatively quickly, I definitely appreciate that. And if you have any other shout outs, please do reach out to us, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com, or make a comment under the episode if you're on Spotify. Doesn't matter which episode you comment on, by the way. I get all the comments. Or on YouTube, of course, under any of our videos or podcast episodes. I have mentioned in the past that you can post on any of your podcatchers of choice. I should be clear that that's actually not correct. I don't actually have access to many. I've only discovered this by looking at some of the analytics recently. Many of you listen to the podcast on some pretty fringe podcatchers. And by the way, I understand I don't use one of the big ones either. There's ones that your preference may vary. But if they have some kind of commenting system, I cannot read those comments because I don't even know the apps are out there, to be honest. So if they have commenting and you do want to reach out to us, please do send an email to needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. I probably will not get those comments. The ones I definitely get notifications on, as I mentioned, YouTube, Spotify. And the easiest way, once again, just email us. We all love reading your emails, by the way. Okay, so for the year in movies, this was not a great year for the box office, especially in the United States, and especially when it comes to films that are geared towards adult audiences. We obviously had massive hits with Lilo and Stitch, with Minecraft, so anything that is a nostalgia play for especially younger audiences. Minecraft, of course, a whole generation of kids, multiple generations now, have grown up playing those video games. Video games, if we want to just talk about micro trends here, video game adaptations are absolutely going to be a huge continuing IP source going forward. You think about The Last of Us Season 1 specifically, rather than Season 2, of The Last of Us, one of the highest rated seasons of a TV series worldwide ever. The massive success of Minecraft, of course, and now Fallout on Amazon Prime, and many others that are yet to come. This is what comic books were 20 years ago, and then peaking probably about 10 years ago, where all these adaptations were making tons of money. There were multiple competing comic book IP franchises competing with each other. This is going to be the case, I believe, for video games now, because that is culturally, for this next generation of folks, that is their pop culture. It is how they interact with each other. They all have shared experiences with it. And of course, I'm on the outside looking in. I am only watching. I've been watching my nephews and watching my daughter play these games, but I am on the outside. I used to be a gamer, but have fallen off of it significantly in the past 20 years or so. Life and parenthood gets in the way. And of course, the nostalgia play of, or any kind of nostalgia play, we saw How to Train Your Dragon, a very successful adaptation, live action adaptation this very year, from a franchise that isn't even that old, Lilo and Stitch. You go down the line of all the biggest hits of the year, and that window of nostalgia now is not 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. It is now 15 years. And that's going to be put to the test for sure this upcoming year, 2026, with the Moana live action, which I have so many question marks about the idea that you're rebooting a movie that just had a hugely successful second chapter just last year, and now you're going to reboot the original with a live action version this year of a film that sure is almost 10 years old now, the original. But that's, first of all, only 10 years. And second of all, for the most part, that film exploded into the popular consciousness during COVID when Disney Plus premiered. So that's 5 years ago. So we're doing nostalgia for 5 years ago now. So I don't know how much shorter this self-cannibalization of the culture can exist. But it is the trend for the time being. But back to my broader point, which is that the one audience that has not turned back in movie theaters, especially here in the United States, because some of these adult-themed films have been hits overseas, But in the US, adult audiences, for the most part, are still not back in theaters. And I would say, especially, I'm going to recommend some films here that should have been seen in the theaters. I think they were better in the theaters. Most people watch them at home. They are very good at home, but are still better in the theater, especially if you're the type of person who complains, I can't get through a whole entire movie. I'm constantly distracted. Being in the theater forces you to focus on that giant screen, and just seeing something on the big screen, do reconnect with that experience. I'm sure it was magical when you were young, especially if you are a movie watcher and a TV watcher. There's the convenience of seeing it at home, but make the effort to go see things in movie theaters. It is a different experience. And by the way, if you are like, I can't go see a movie in the movie theater, it is too noisy, the kids are annoying, I'd say nowadays, if you haven't been back to the theaters since COVID, or rarely have been, you now get the apps installed on your phone, pick a screening where it's not too crowded. You can pre-buy your tickets so you know how many people will be in there. Go to a theater that's not that attended, and you can have this incredible experience, which I love, by the way. Oftentimes I show up at these theaters and it's maybe just 2 or 3 weeks into a very short run for these movies. There is almost nobody in the theater, and it's just a magical, massive, biggest possible screen, just for my personal viewing pleasure, basically. So all that is to say that if we want more of these adult-themed films in theaters, we have to go see them in theaters, or else we're just going to end up having them on TV. And then if you're going to complain that a film like Bugonia, which we'll be discussing in this podcast, ends up being turned into a 6-hour season and being like, oh man, that was not worth 6 hours. It should have been 2 hours. Well, if you watch it on Netflix, Netflix is going to think you want to see it on Netflix, and they're going to spend the same amount of money on 6 hours or 2 hours. They'll say 6 hours every single time. So this is a distortion that's happening in among these stories in general. So please go see movies in movie theaters. Support your movie theater. If you don't want to go to one of the big chains, go to your local mom and pop movie theater, and especially go see these films that are, of course, go see the blockbusters, go see the Sinners, go see the Avatars, the ones that give you a true roller coaster ride experience. Sure, those are great in the movie theater, but go see the more intimate stories on a big screen. It still is, it's a different experience. And if you don't spend a fortune on food and snacks, it still is a relatively cheap date. All right, one more caveat before we get into the breakdown. I actually had a list of about 50 movies. This was a very good year for movies, I thought. Maybe not at the box office, but definitely in the quality of the films. And I'll probably have in the Patreon, when that day comes that I actually launch it, there'll be an episode where I go through the remainder of the list. Towards the bottom of that 50, just to be clear, these aren't all 4-star masterpieces. These are niches. Are you a big fan of horror movies, for example? Do you like more experimental movies? Or maybe more popular films that were like 2/3 of a great film and then kind of fell off, but I still gotta say, well, that was pretty impressive what you did there. So mixed bag, but definitely additional films I wanted to call out. And just to speak to the fact that not only was this a strong year with a lot of lesser films that were still very good, or at least very interesting, a lot of new talent emerging. So that's the double-edged sword of the marketplace we're in now. You have extremely expensive films and then very small films that also can succeed. But sometimes in some years, I can barely put together a top 10 that I feel very good about. And then maybe another 5 or 8 films that I kind of say, well, nice try, interesting, but not fully successful. But this year there was 20, maybe more than 20 films that I would have easily put into a top 10 in most years. And that's why my list is so long. Okay, so let's kick things off. By the way, as usual with me, I'm already cheating on the very first item on my list. I did intend to cut this to a list of 20. As I was putting my list together, I realized I had completely overlooked a film that I absolutely had to include in the top 20. So I ended up with 21 films. And I didn't want to cut any of these here at number 20. So it's a tie at 20. I know. But they're both worth having on the list. Trust me. So my number 20, probably much higher on many other lists, is Sentimental Value. I saw this at a film festival. I was very excited for this film from Joachim Trier, who had just made a few years back now, The Worst Person in the World, also starring Renata Rensby. After seeing that film, I started seeing some of his back catalog. I still am missing most of his films. But everything I have seen of his has been such an interesting reinvention or deconstruction of a genre. Most recently in The Worst Person in the World, an inversion to a large extent of a rom-com. And that film was honestly one of my favorite films, probably of the last 3 years. It would make a top 5 collectively across those 3 years. All that is to say, I was very excited for this. If this thing slots into any kind of genre at all, it is basically his version of an Ingmar Bergman film. And Renata Rensby plays this actress who has a lot of neuroses and perhaps some kind of mental health crisis she's in the midst of. Her mother has passed away recently, and her absentee father, who's a movie director, played by Stellan Skarsgård, comes back into their lives again after being absent for a while, mostly because he wants the family house again, and he also wants to shoot his new movie there. And the story follows each of these different characters. First of all, the film has this incredible opening and closing sequence. So in a season of films that have very strong endings, this is a great ending, but also a great beginning. The opening scene features the house, this very house that this family has grown in from generation to generation. And that's what the film is about to a large extent, how this family and this house itself is haunted by the people who've lived in it. But we take on the POV of the house, watching these different generations of folks living in it. A true knockout of an opening sequence. And the ending, again, another knockout, and really pays off the themes, especially when you think about the first and last scene and how they communicate with each other. My problem is with the middle of the film, which is obviously most of it. At points, if we consider Renata Rensby as the star of the film, she disappears for periods of time. The story very much becomes about Skarsgård, who then befriends Elle Fanning, an American actress who he then co-opts to be in this film rather than his daughter, because his daughter initially rejects it. And of course, we kind of know the trajectory of the story from the very beginning, and we're just waiting for it to come around. So it was this pacing that didn't work for me. But still, every one of those moments are fantastic. The overall effect of the story didn't quite land the way I think it was intended to for me. But I think it's very different for other folks. I think in general, people love this movie. And of course, there's a lot of talk of Skarsgård will probably get an Academy Award nomination. Rensby will also probably get, I think she's in Best Actress, she'll probably get a nomination. But for me, the younger sister in the story, played by Inga Lilius, is what really puts the film over the top. She just is watching, like the house at the beginning, watching what's occurring, and is the heart and the soul of this family. And there's an amazing emotional payoff to that as well. And this is just available now to rent in the US. I believe still playing in theaters as well. And that's Sentimental Value. Okay, so that's in a tie at number 20 with If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. You really could not have a different tone here. I mean, two films exploring the idea that, hey, you can be a selfish parent, and Stellan Skarsgård's performance in the previous film, very much he has prioritized his own well-being over the well-being of his family. And in his own extremely egomaniacal way, trying to heal this rift with his daughters, but in the most selfish way possible. So an interesting dynamic there. And in this film, we have a mother who also is thwarting her own creative ambitions to try to help her daughter through this health crisis she's going through. But there's also an aspect of her daughter's neuroses. Is this inherited? So the guilt of being a mom and trying to prioritize yourself over your child. And then, of course, the double guilt of, is this neuroses, that this condition that my daughter may be experiencing, that may be all in her head, have I somehow passed this on to my child? All very relatable stresses that we deal with as parents. And what a stressful film this is. It is a film that is incredibly well made, and yet is something that is I am reluctant to revisit because it is so stress-inducing. This film has incredible tone management, being able to pull off this incredibly stressful tone continuously while still milking the comedy from this horrific, oftentimes feeling film. But the main reason to recommend this or to put it on top of any list is for Rose Byrne, which for me, the best performance by an actress this year. In every frame of the film, the camera right in her face, literally we are seeing the whole world through, not through her POV, but we are watching her experience all this in such an intimate way where we can barely see what is happening around her. And it's a truly breathtaking performance, worth recommendation just for that. Just found out, by the way, that this is premiering on HBO Max in about 2 weeks. So do check it out when it premieres. By the time it comes out, the Academy Award nominations would have already been announced. And I'm pretty certain that Rose Byrne will have one of those nominations. Also want to shout out that A$AP Rocky, who had a great couple of scenes in Highest to Lowest, the film I didn't love, by the way, but terrific performance. He really brought an energy to it. And I'm like, is this guy a real actor, or is this just some kind of charisma that he brings as a music performer? I think he's a real actor. I think he's the real deal. Here he is again in a very different role this same year in this film. If I had legs, I'd kick you. And he's terrific. So can't wait to see what he does next. Okay, I'm going to try to track this. My list is a mess, but okay. I think those are tied for 20. So then 19, weapons. So Darren and I have already discussed this on the podcast before. There's a whole episode about it if you'd like to go check it out. This film originally was much higher on my list. I always had problems with it. I felt like it was thematically thin, but boy, what an experience this was to see in the theater. The audience was so into it. If you did see this in the theater, it's very popular, by the way. So if you did happen to see it, you really lucked out. It was one of those films that played so well in theaters. I think a significant reason why it was such a huge blockbuster. It has definitely dropped on my list. It is still incredibly well made. It has another one of these incredible opening sequences in another film with an incredible opening sequence this year. But honestly, seeing this more than once now, after that initial viewing, watching with my wife, watching it at home, the ending did not play the way it did before. Darren and I have discussed this as well. Did not play as well with our significant others once we watched it a second time, and didn't hold up as well as I had hoped. Nonetheless, what a blast it was to see this in theaters. Love seeing a original film, not based on any kind of IP, written, directed by this new up-and-coming Zach Krager, who's now producing projects as well. This, of course, is available on HBO Max. A lot of the films on my list are available on HBO Max now. And even if you're not traditionally a fan of horror, another reason I think this film works is because primarily it is a thriller with a mystery, which works so well. I called this out when we did the full movie deep dive. They should do more of this. I think that if you have a mystery inside of a horror film that pulls you through, they almost always turn into big box office hits. And this is definitely one of the best one we've seen in this mold. Okay, my number 18 is Blue Moon. I'm a big fan of Richard Linklater in general. Not all his films work for me, but most of the time they do. I have not watched Nouvelle Vague on Netflix this year, which is one of my blind spots. And maybe that would have ranked somewhere on this list as well, although this is definitely the film that got more positive reviews, so it's the one that I gravitated to. And also stars Ethan Hawke, who's worked with Linklater many times before. In this film, he plays a fictionalized Lawrence Hart, a real person, but a fictionalized moment in his biography. Not a spoiler here, he dies in the opening scene of the film. And then we flash back to just a few months earlier. It is the day that he is catching the previews of Oklahoma, a new musical from his writing partner, Richard Rogers, and the first Rogers and Hammerstein musical, Oklahoma that is, which of course became a phenomenal success, and they became the most successful Broadway writing partnership of all times. But before Rogers and Hammerstein, there was Rogers and Hart. And by the way, I didn't know any of this before going into this film. I'm not a fan of musicals in general, but even I recognize these songs because they're so massively popular. And the entire film is Hart in this bar across the street. Oklahoma lets out at some point over the course of this evening. The rabble rolls in. He knows, even the way the media covers things, even the way he's forgotten in the moment, that this is the ascension of his partner, and he knows that he's a man lost in time. We know this, of course, he's going to die in just a few months. We see that in the opening section of the film itself. But just that is even beyond the knowing the history of this moment. That's what the film is about. Your moment has passed and you have missed the next step on that rung of the ladder and seeing everybody pass you by. And Ethan Hawke's performance is incredible in this film. He's completely transformed, by the way. He's 5'11", I believe, and which is tall for an actor, by the way, in general. But he's playing a 5 foot tall person, and they have rigged this set but the camera is all shot like a play in this set, although the camera is moving constantly. And they have rigged the set so that he is shorter than everybody else. And his performance is so transformational. And of course, I saw this film as I was watching The Lowdown and so impressed with his performance. That was on my top 10 list last week of TV shows. So impressed with Ethan Hawke's performance there. And then simultaneously, so different, so utterly different, this performance. He has his heart here in this film. Terrific performance once again. Really beautifully staged. Linklater's really good at doing these very long takes. Gets great performances from everybody involved. This is not factual. This is a fictionalized night that did occur. But of course, all these people just happening to walk into the bar at this time when he's there as well. Of course, all of this is there to make a point to, like, basically it's like, this is your life, because of course it is passing him by. And of course, that, again, another brilliant central performance. Definitely going to be nominated for an Academy Award here, I believe, maybe even win. But lastly, so funny, like trying to capture what probably made Hart such a witty writer of lyrics. The film is laugh out loud funny, so sharp, so quick-witted in this dialogue, even though it is all doomed because we know that this is the very end of Hart's life. And that's Blue Moon, available to rent. I don't believe it's streaming anywhere yet. Okay, my number 17 is One of Them Days. A surprise hit from about a year ago now. One of the few films to break out at the January box office. Now a sequel's on the way. This comedy featuring Keke Palmer and SZA as roommates that are just trying to make their rent. They have one crazy day in which to get their resources together to pull off the heist of paying their bills for the month. And if that sounds somewhat like if you grew up watching the old Friday movies, definitely is in the vein of that. I think this is even funnier. The girls have incredible chemistry with each other. I don't have much more to say about this. I mean, the film is very well made. It has great characters, all these random weirdos in the neighborhood that pop in. I think I mentioned this already, but there's a sequel on the way because this did so well. And all these oddballs in the neighborhood are going to pop up in subsequent films. If you started watching this on Netflix, it's easy to stream. If you found the first 15 minutes or so, I was like, okay, a little cliched. I know where this is going. But as it keeps going, it just finds its own groove. I laughed so many times watching this movie. And I don't often put comedies on my top 20, so I definitely want to shout out a comedy. I almost put the Naked Gun remake here on my list as well. An incredible film to watch in theaters, the Naked Gun film, just a laugh a minute. And this is more structured, has an actual plot, great characters. So more of a movie than the Naked Gun gag fest was. But in both cases, just two really funny films. And it goes back to the idea that, hey, everybody, both of these films worked in theaters, made money in theaters. So it's like, go see a movie in a theater. You'll laugh. If it's a comedy, if it's a good comedy, you'll laugh even more than you would watching it by yourself. And that's One of Them Days, and you can watch it on Netflix. Okay, my number 16 movie of the year. This was tough for me. I didn't know where to place this. Everything here from here on in could have easily been in my top 10 or at the bottom of my top 10. There was a lot of jockeying there for that lower level. So if you think this is kind of low, it could have easily ended higher. It was just all a matter of how the day I organized my list. It's Bugonia, which we're going to talk in much more detail in this very episode. This is Yorgos Lanthimos' latest film. 3 films in 3 years. Haven't been a huge fan of the last 2, although I was a huge fan of some of his earlier films. The Lobster is still my favorite of all of his films. This is a remake of the Korean film Save the Green Planet from about a decade ago, maybe longer. Very faithful in plot, but very different in tone and in character development and in motivation. So even if you have seen that film by chance, which is pretty unseen, to be honest, this is still a very interesting film to watch, even as an adaptation of that previous film. This script is by Will Tracy. Yorgos is not involved with writing this script, although he always has the material tailored to him, but he's co-written most of his other films. But this is something that came to him through Ari Aster, who presented it to him, who had his own conspiracy thriller this year. And this film features 2 incredible performances. Emma Stone as this ruthless girl boss who nonetheless presents as a very progressive and kindly CEO of this pharmaceutical company. Jesse Plemons' character, Teddy, actually works at the pharmaceutical company. He's dealing with the tragedy his mother is in a coma. She is part of a drug trial at that company. And he has convinced himself, he's gone down so many rabbit holes on the internet, convinced himself that there is an alien conspiracy to take over the world, and that the CEO of his very company must be one of these aliens. And then, of course, as we watch the film, we wonder, is he insane? Is there any chance that what he's saying is possibly true? Of course, you can't trust anything he says. He obviously has a personal agenda. Despite denying his personal agenda, he obviously is driven by the results of this drug trial that have put his mother into a coma. And this film is a pitch black comedy with another extremely memorable ending. And just so of the moment, this idea that we live in a world where we're all drones around this queen bee, these corporate hives, and that we are controlled to a large extent by the whims of these leaders who often have very little rationale for what they request other than something they read in some kind of managerial handbook, and looking for some meaning in your lives in these fringe conspiracies and the incredible dark places that these dark fantasies can take you. And the film is also wildly funny, and it is also a tone shift in the overly stylistic, irritating, oftentimes, in my opinion, direction that Yorgos Lanthimos' style had been drifting towards. So an incredibly bleak comedy with perfectly managed tone, and it's one of Yorgos' best films. It's one of the best performances by Emma Stone in a career of great performances, and perhaps the best performance ever by Jesse Plemons. I do hope that when the Academy Awards get announced that he's not forgotten. Okay, my number 15 movie for the year is Black Bag by Steven Soderbergh, currently available on Amazon Prime. This film was floating in my top 10 for most of the year. Of course, so many things came in at the end of the year, it got bumped down, and I just rewatched it because it came out very early in the year, I think February or March. And I did wonder to myself, would I keep that on my top 10? I have to go and revisit it. And just revisited it this very week. And I have to say, what a pleasure this film was to watch again. We've now seen many films recently where being a spy or an agent of some kind is a metaphor for having to hide aspects of yourself in relationships. And this film is maybe the most entertaining version of it, and most concise as well. A nice tight script from David Koepp. By the way, Soderbergh and Koepp also made a horror film this year. I mean, you could call it a horror film, I guess, called Presence. And that film, in my opinion, I know that's on some people's top 10 lists. That film is terrible. This one is not. It's just fun and sexy entertainment for an adult audience. A very attractive cast. You have Cate Blanchett, perfect in this role of this wife that you don't know if you should trust her or not. Michael Fassbender playing against type here, being extremely restrained. Darren did not like the film because he did not like the restraint of Fassbender's performance. I think it's so great, even the second time around, even more so, because you see Fassbender ready to strike out in his eyes, but contained in this very urbane performance. I think it works really well. Tom Burke, Marissa Abella, Naomi Harris, completely ageless, perhaps the most beautiful she's ever looked in a film, and Regine Page in these set of couples that early in the film, great scene early on where they meet for a dinner together where he doses the wine and these people start being a little too honest with each other. All of this because he's trying to suss out a spy in his midst who may very well be his wife herself. And each one of these sequences in the film where he is interrogating Michael Fassbender's interrogating these different suspects are electric. There's some thrilling sequences where they barely get away with something they're trying to get away with. There's some action set pieces, but the real juice in this film is these conversations between these folks who do not know whether they should trust each other among their friend group, within the couples themselves, and even between this married couple who in the end have a wildly romantic commitment to each other regardless of what the outcome might be. So it's really a very fun film to watch. And that's Black Bag, and it's available on Amazon Prime. Okay, my number 14 is Sinners. I started to do some of this revision in some conversations with Darren recently. I saw Sinners in the movie theaters. I saw it after there was this unanimous praise that this was the best movie of the year and would continue to be the best movie of the year. It is on most critics' lists number 2 for the year. So I still stayed very much in the conversation. And I left the theater pretty disappointed, I have to say. And in my initial review, I praised all the things I thought about that were spectacular. Some of the musical sequences are truly electrifying, especially one like pretty much dead center in the movie. But once the supernatural element of the plot kicks in, I thought it was so rote, and I thought the ending was just the plotting of it, and some of the inconsistencies of it were so boilerplate and resolved in relatively uninteresting ways that I had really dinged the entire film. But given the fact that this has been so praised all year round, I went back to it. And what I have to say is, rewatching it, I had undervalued, I still have all the same critiques about the end of the film, by the way, but I had really undervalued the incredible world building that came early on. All the things I praised before basically stood out even more. Let's just talk about the performances really quickly. Michael B. Jordan, completely convincing as 2 completely different performances. A fantastic star making. I mean, he's already a star, but really feels like he's come on the scene as like a real star that can do anything in a way that, to me anyway, is kind of like I can't wait to see what he does next. Haley Steinfeld, phenomenal performance, of course, will probably get an Academy Award nomination. Jack O'Connell as this villainous character, so entertaining. Delroy Lindo giving another great performance. Wunmi Musako, probably the MVP in supporting here, really sells the emotion of some of these, the real power of later in the film itself. And of course, Miles Canton as this young guitar player, central to all the events here in the film. Not an actor before now. And basically, the first 2/3 of this film are incredibly well made, incredible cinematography, incredible music, incredible performances. And I just had to forgive it some of, I think, really, honestly, some issues with the plot. And also the other thing, and maybe this is just a limitation of the budget, I honestly think if there was a 3-hour version of this movie, I'm not always a fan of, I love that Black Bad was so compact in just my previous recommendation. This film, pretty long, over 2 hours long. I think this film needed to be 3 hours long. There is so much backstory that is baked into the relationships between the brothers, their upbringing, their being in Chicago and what happened there, and backstory to other characters as well. And also just being able to, for example, see a character shift, a decision being made by some of these characters as they decide to give in to this vampire hive mind, which I feel there is cut short oftentimes. So all that is to say, if there's a 3-hour version of this movie, I think it's the better version of this movie. And maybe there is. So not the masterpiece people claim it is, but I think I discounted the moments of it that are moments of the year because of some of the shortcomings I felt. Okay, my 13, 12, and 11 about these 3 films. These 3 films were in my top 10. I moved them out of my top 10 because these are top 10 for Victor, not top 10 for general audiences. So I still definitely want to call them out, but I did move things around to accommodate what I think is more worthy of recommendation versus my personal tastes. But they're just right outside the top 10. My number 13 is Bring Her Back. Oh, by the way, Sinners available on HBO Max and now available on Amazon Prime. So if you don't have HBO Max and you've been wanting to see it, it's available on Amazon Prime now. And Bring Her Back, my number 13, also available on HBO Max. This film is Danny and Michael Filippo, the Australian twins, their follow-up to Talk to Me. And whereas that was a surprise blockbuster horror movie that made on a very small budget, the rare instant franchise spinning horror film that is a very entertaining horror film, this film, Bring Her Back, as I've mentioned previously, a film I recommend, but be in the right mood for it because it's a real downer of a film. But nonetheless is just an incredible technical step up for the brothers. Features universally brilliant performances. Sally Hawkins is almost certainly not going to get an Academy Award nomination, but deserves one for her amazing performance as this villainous character who's adopted these kids. And we don't know exactly what her plans are for them, but we know something nefarious is afoot, so I'm not going to spoil it for all of you. but so sympathetic all the way through because she is using these adopted kids as a way to fill this hole, this loss of her daughter, and the extreme decisions that we will make dealing with our loss and our sadness. It's really upsetting, but very emotionally true and beautifully made. Talk to Me was extremely well made on a smaller budget. And this on a slightly bigger budget is such a confident, visually told story. And I personally, my bias is I like seeing new filmmakers. I like new voices. I like being surprised. And this was unexpected in so many ways. I did think it was going to be another fun horror film. Instead, it was a very deeply felt and sad and beautifully made film. Bring Her Back, and it's available on HBO Max. Okay, next up, a film that was even higher on my list, The Phoenician Scheme. Now, the reason I bumped this down, even though it was like in my top 5, basically, is because I know this is going to be such a self-selecting group of people that are going to appreciate this. It's the new Wes Anderson film. If you have an aversion to Anderson, I have spoken to so many people that are just like, I can't watch Anderson films anymore. They're so designed and they're so persnickety and they're just cold to the touch for some people. And I understand where you're coming from. I completely appreciate that. This film is not going to change your mind about that, for sure. But something strange happened. I had the same critiques about Anderson, even in some of the films that people really liked, like the Grand Budapest Hotel, which I love, but did have all those caveats in place. That maybe he had taken this style to its possible, the full extent that it can go without becoming diminishing returns. And yet with Asteroid City and now with this film, it seems like the more artificial the world becomes, somehow he's able to get at something more emotionally true. And it's almost like against my own defenses, I was really moved by Asteroid City. And now again here, especially in this father-daughter story. And also so much of this has to do with when I saw the film. In this film, Benicio del Toro plays this egomaniacal billionaire who's obsessed with just his own selfish needs, who starts to build a relationship with his daughter. So first of all, the whole daddy-daughter thing really worked for me. This is before One Battle After Another. This is before Sentimental Value. So early in a year full of bad dads trying to repair relationships with their daughters, this was the first one that got me in that emotional place. And also, speaking of One Battle After Another, Benicio del Toro, an actor I've always appreciated, really coming into his own in this particular year, just fully owning his odd charisma. He is magnetic and hilarious, so funny in Phoenician Scheme, but a film full of absolutely hilarious performances. Michael Cera, a true comedic highlight here, and of course, also in The Running Man. But Bryan Cranston, Tom Hanks, both giving very small, very funny performances. But just a really stellar cast across the board, as you expect from all of Anderson's films. And as the daughter, Mia Thrippleton, who's the daughter of Kate Winslet, and I think has a real future. This terrific performances, a great discovery in her. Love seeing Michael Cera back. Benicio del Toro at his absolute best. And where this film ends at the end, I just had a huge smile on my face. I just loved everything this film did. And as strange as Anderson's storytelling has become, so in and of itself and immediately identifiable, it's so easy to satirize. It's somehow, the more up his own ass he gets, the more these films are working for me. And maybe there will be diminishing returns eventually. So if you've already gotten there, I understand it. But for me, I loved this film. Okay, and at my number 11, actually, once again, higher up on my list, but this is a Victor special, the Japanese film called Cloud from the director Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And again, this is one of those films that if you have a relationship with this filmmaker, has way more value to it. This is the director of a couple of decades old now at this point, the film Cure, one of the best psychological thrillers of the past few decades. The techno ghost story Pulse, also from around 20 years ago. But if you have kept up with his filmography and his interests in this slow motion apocalypse that's happening in Japan that he feels, this film is yet another perfect distillation of those themes. And I've seen this film described as it's an action movie, it's a horror movie, it's a conspiracy thriller. It's actually all those things, but in such a mundane package. The protagonist of this story is someone who basically resells things online and undercuts all the people that he buys from and the screws over the customers as well, and moves around from one place in Japan to another to get away from people who are complaining about his bad service on both ends of that relationship. And as mundane a setup as that is, suddenly, even though he's moved to some rural area of Japan, he suddenly starts just seeing people outside of his house. And then in the background, we start seeing something very Cronenbergian, by the way, some kind of conspiracy beyond his purview, which eventually erupts into comedic and crazy over-the-top violence in ways you would not foresee, the situation escalating so quickly. And this is not the only film on my list that plays like a very dark comedy about a very mundane set of stakes, which ends intentionally in an apocalyptic place, surprising as that is. And this is a year of conspiracy thrillers and a year of critiquing our culture for being way too online and way too physically disconnected. And that is all over the films of the year, but maybe best represented in this film, Cloud, which is now available to rent in the US. Okay, so now I'm in my top 10. Of course, before I get to my top 10, two cheats. I have two more cheats. These are two films that were nominated for Academy Awards last year, or at least for awards last year, one for Academy Awards, but were not available in the US until 2025, so I did not see them. So I want to shout them out because I have not shouted them out before. One is the Brazilian film, I'm Still Here, from Walter Salles. And this film I felt last year didn't get, part of the reason I had skipped it in theaters and didn't see it until it premiered on Netflix and became a very big hit on Netflix, was all the reviews were saying it's good, but it's very cliched. I disagree completely. I thought this film was very good, period, and not cliched. What surprised me about it, it's based on a true story about this family, their father, who's a lawyer, representing the rebels in the very complicated Brazilian miracle that occurred in the 70s, in which this totalitarian government was oppressing all kinds of critique of their authority, and people were just disappearing left and right. The lawyer who simply was providing legal assistance and passing messages for some of these people who are incarcerated ends up being captured, tortured, and eventually we discover disappeared completely. And it's this family who are not the impoverished and jailed underclass, but living in Rio, walking distance to the beach, like living the fantasy of what the upper class achieved in this period of time. And seeing their world come apart is jarring and disturbing, and a wake-up call to anybody who's kind of just nodding their heads all over the world right now. There's a lot of authoritarianism rising up, and you think about a lot of these. If you're in a comfortable position, you kind of just accept things, especially if things are going well for you, until one day the knock on the door is for you. And it happened then, and hopefully we're not seeing more of that happening today. But it is a bit of a rude awakening. But also it is an incredibly humane film as well, as we see not just the moment in time, this moment when things fall apart in the 70s, but this family over the decades dealing with this healing over time and how things improve in some ways. And sometimes history repeats itself, unfortunately. But I think it's a very rich and beautiful film and has an incredible central performance. Fernandez Torres playing the matriarch of the family. And as I mentioned, this was actually nominated for Best Picture, I believe, and Best Foreign Language Film last year, the rare foreign language film to get a Best Picture nomination as well, and was not released in the US until 2025. And then, of course, premiered on Netflix and was a big hit on Netflix. And it's still there now. If you want to catch up on it and missed it, it's terrific. And my last cheat from last year is Hard Truths, another film that was not released in the US until this year. This is from Mike Leigh. It's available on Canopy, by the way. If you have a library card, you can watch it on Canopy for free. And I had some experience. I've only seen, Mike Leigh's made many films, this British director. I've only seen a few of them. And I think I watched them when I was too young. Secrets and Lies, 30 years old now, was nominated for Best Picture all the way back then, when the type of thing of having a small indie like that be nominated for Best Picture was pretty rare. And that film also starred Marianne Jean-Baptiste a full 30 years ago. But for some reason, despite all the praise he had as a director, it didn't really work for me. I didn't really get it, I'd have to say. And the reason I get it now is because I'm older. That's basically what it means. I was so knocked out by Hard Truths that I went back and watched a bunch of his other films. I watched Secrets and Lies, a film that I'd seen when I was much younger, of course, and didn't appreciate. I liked it a lot more the second time around. But the one film that I watched that knocked me out the most was a film called Another Year. Do track that down if you are a Mike Leigh fan and haven't seen it. This incredible story of this older couple, another year in their lives, and their relationship with one of their best friends. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but you watch the whole entire film from their point of view, and then you realize in the final moments, in the very final moments of the film, that the story hasn't been their story at all. And it was such an incredible revelation in watching that film. So we really do want to highly recommend Another Year. But the reason I went back and watched some of these earlier films was because I was so knocked out by this film, Hard Truths, which features incredible. She was not even nominated for an Academy Award. Marianne Jean-Baptiste coming back to working with Mike Leigh after 30 years from Secrets and Lies, the Academy Award nominated film that I mentioned earlier. And what an incredible performance. An incredibly brazen, unlikable character. This is one of the most unlikable and self-destructive characters you will ever see in a film. And somehow she is three-dimensional. We understand why she's doing these horrible self-destructive things, and she's surrounded by people who are trying to support her. They are the sympathetic ones, but we somehow feel for her. It's in the performance, and she is able to convey the interiority of this incredibly unlikable character. But we have all known people like this, people who cannot get out of their own way, who cannot accept or allow themselves to have a moment of happiness, and seeing other people happy around them somehow triggers them. It is a completely recognizable type, and it is so easy to just want to turn this person off, but instead she somehow generates our empathy. And the film is about these people who live in the world with us, and maybe even in our families. It is an incredible performance, and the whole film relies on it completely. And it is, like I said, I can't believe this was not nominated for an Academy Award. She gives one of the best performances by an actress I've seen in decades, perhaps. So it's remarkable, truly remarkable. But of course, a portrait of a very unlikable person. So your mileage may vary. That's why I have it in my other list. But it is a remarkable performance. Oh, and Mike Leigh, by the way, now in retrospect, going back and seeing some of his earlier work, I don't think anyone else does this better. Just observing these people who, and a lot of this is improvised. It's his style of writing a skeleton of a script and then letting the characters fill in the blanks themselves, the actors themselves. And I don't think anyone does this kind of observational, middle-class examination better than Leigh after this mini marathon I had of his works this year. All right, in my top 10, it's just 10 movies. There's no caveats. It's just the top 10. And like I mentioned, some of the films that were in my top 15, probably the entire top 20, but definitely in that top 15, they could have easily slotted at the bottom of my top 10. It was a very good year. Number 10, Train Dreams. So we talked about it here on the podcast. Darren brought it up again last week. We have a whole episode on it, so I won't spend too much time on it, but easily available on Netflix. This film might have even ranked higher if I'd seen it in a movie theater. It is a beautiful, visual, sumptuous meditation on this journey that we all go on, trying to live within nature, trying to carve out our own selves in society, in nature, in the world itself, and how even with our disappointments, even with our tragedies, that in the end, life is miraculous, magical. An incredible and beautiful film from Clint Bentley, and featuring an incredible central performance from Joel Edgerton, and available on Netflix. And it is just a beautiful tone poem. Highly recommended. Okay, my number 9 movie of the list. I haven't seen this on anyone else's list. And so much of seeing a movie for me is in the surprise of it. This is why I try not to watch trailers if I'm really committed to something. If I hear something is good, I'll be like, and I trust the critic, I'll just go see it. I don't want to do too much analysis on it. I don't want to hype myself up too much on it. And as a matter of fact, maybe some of the films that are lower down on my list that have more critical praise, would be higher on my list if I didn't have this layer of expectations around them. All that is to say is that I have been watching films this year. AMC and all the major chains here in the US, and I assume around the world, have a program where on Mondays you can go see a movie for very cheap, less than half the price of a ticket, and you see it completely blind. And I've seen quite a few films this year that were in this blind mode. Bring Her Back actually was one of the films I saw this way, although that was something that was on my radar. But one of the films that came up, and I don't even think got a wide release, was a film called Twinless, co-starring and written and directed by someone I have never seen before, James Sweeney, and starring Dylan O'Brien. And the less you know about this movie, the better. What I'll just tell you is that it's called Twinless because we find out early in the film that Dylan O'Brien has a twin who has passed away. And he goes to a support group in which other people who've lost this twin in their lives, obviously the relationship between twins is very strong. It's basically a support group to deal with the very unique circumstances that entails. And there he meets a very different style person. He's like a hockey fan. He's very interior. And you have someone who is much more flamboyant in this character of James Sweeney, who's also lost a twin. And the odd relationship that forms between them as they have this commonality. And we start to understand that psychologically they have this real lack, which of course they have, in a way, mended between themselves. And then this is where you should not know too much about this film. Don't even read the description of it, because then about a third of the way through the film, maybe less, there is a reveal that was, for me, utterly thrilling, that they just took the film and turned it into something completely different. And that's another theme of the year. There are so many thrillers that are comedies. I was just talking about the Japanese film Cloud, which keeps changing what genre it is from every half hour or so. And it even goes to some of the big films of the year that merge different genres together. It could be even said with Sinners, which has elements of comedy and a gangster film and a horror film and a musical. So these genre mashups are something we're seeing more and more of. But this film is played so straight that when that first twist comes, it is so surprising. This film, by the way, is so funny. And at one point you're like, is this going to turn into like a De Palma-like thriller? And there are elements of a thriller to it also, but also hilariously funny. And with so many surprises in it, I don't want to spoil them for you, but try to go into it as blind as possible. It was one of my greatest pleasures of seeing it this year. And of course, primarily because I had no idea what I was in for at all. I would recommend this almost to anyone because it is such an entertaining film, I think. But except for if you have any kind of squeamishness around a pretty graphic sex scene that's in the film, but also very funny, by the way, also very funny. So I hope I intrigued you without spoiling anything because it is quite an interesting ride to go on. Oh, and lastly, I want to shout out again, Dylan O'Brien, someone who I really hasn't been on my radar at all. I think I saw one of those, I can't even remember, Torch Trials, whatever that series, or Maze Runner, I'm sorry, the Maze Runner. So I think I saw one of those, didn't see him on TV, so really don't have much of a relationship with him at all. He was in a film last year called Caddo Lake, which wasn't a full success, was advertised as a horror movie. Not a horror movie, by the way, if anyone is trying to catch up on that one. Has a really satisfying twist, but I thought he gave a very good performance in that film. And here, you do not realize until later in the film what an incredible performance he's giving here. I really now want to see what he's going to do next. Again, that's Twinless. I don't even think it's been released fully in the US. Like I said, I saw it at one of these surprise sneak previews. I don't think it got a wide release or any kind of release. I don't think it's available to stream. I don't know where that's going to pop up, but if you happen to be able to see Twinless, check it out. Okay, my number 8. This one is on a lot of top 10 lists. It was just an accident, from Jafar Panahi, who's mostly done experimental films. He's been, anyone who's familiar with his biography, he is currently in absentia under house arrest in Iran. This is not the first time this has happened to him. He actually was under house arrest physically in Iran when he made a movie called This Is Not a Movie. He was banned from making movies, so he shot it on his iPhone. He has another movie that he shot because he was not allowed to shoot a movie. He just put the iPhone on in his taxi while he drove around, and people came in and out of the taxi, of course, playing out scenes that he had written. So it's all these kind of experiments of like, well, if I was going to make a story, this is kind of how it would be. But this film, It Was Just an Accident, is just a straight up thriller, but a comedic one at that. So this film begins with a family driving home from a wedding. They accidentally hit a dog and damage their car. They end up in the middle of the night at a mechanic's shop. And while they're talking to the mechanic, there's someone else there. This is very well realized visually, the way the camera kind of moves within these different spaces, that there's someone else there in the garage. And that person recognizes the man who has brought in his car as his tormentor when he was captured by the Iranian police. And of course, there's a whole legacy of a generation of people who, mostly student protesters, that were tormented by this secret police. And he does something very rash, and not really a spoiler, but let's just say that he almost kills this guy in an act of passion, but then decides that, well, but what if I'm wrong? But what if I'm wrong? And that might seem like a spoiler. It's not a spoiler. If you actually see the artwork for this movie, you see a whole bunch of people sitting in this van in the middle of a desert. And that's the movie in a nutshell. He starts going from one person to the other, going like, can you identify this guy? Can you back me up on this? And they're like, actually, you got to talk to this guy. And it's everybody looking for more corroborating evidence, and this pool of people getting larger and larger. And the people they have to pay off is very funny. This movie becomes extremely comedic, as tense as it is at times, when the cops show up and they need to look the other way. And he's like, well, I don't have any cash on me to pay them off to look the other way. And he's like, oh, it's okay. I have like a Square device on me. So you could just tap your credit card. And so everybody's looking for a payoff, even the police that are supposed to be investigating this crime. And as this group of people continue to simultaneously dig up and provide the context to the torment that they suffered under, as this group gets bigger and they have to keep having a van full of people going from one location to the other, and all the unforeseen consequences of their actions, it becomes very comedic as well. And again, another great final moment of a movie this year. And that is called It Was Just an Accident. That's still in theaters and available to rent now as well. All right, at number 7 on my list is Marty Supreme. This film barely cracked my top 20 when I first watched it. I gave it 4 stars, but then I'm like, can I put it in my top 10? I had a lot of issues with some of the imagery here correlating to this ping pong expert in the 1950s in New York, a beautiful recreation of New York City in the 1950s, with a terrific, fast-talking, really a different register for Timothée Chalamet. And yet again, just so impressive every time I see him. And now playing this fast-talking con man this is a Josh Safdie working for, I think, the first time on his own as a director, but working again with Ronald Bronstein, the co-writer of Uncut Gems and Good Times as well. And it's about just this moment in your life, because he's a con man. He keeps doubling down on a bad investment. He takes any chance. And this is very much in the mold of Uncut Gems, which was one of the things I dinged the film for, by the way, that it felt a little repetitive, of having made enough to get yourself out of your current circumstance, but then to just keep doubling down and doubling down. But there's a time in your life when you have this insane cockiness and this real belief in yourself, and that confidence is attractive and repellent in equal measure. And that's represented by Gwyneth Paltrow doing a terrific performance as this fading middle-aged movie star who is both seduced and repelled by Marty, an experience that we all in the audience have as well. And in this moment, I thought that it was playing with this idea of the incorrigible, egomaniacal American, especially on a world stage here, and that it was unexamined. But I heard an interview with Safdie that made me realize what he was actually doing with the film, which I can't wait to get into a deeper dive with. But I'll wait until everybody gets a chance to see it, and probably have an episode with Darren at some point where we break down the movie in more detail. But for now, it is a wild ride. It is very funny. It is very stressful. It is beautifully made, has incredible performances across the board. And it looks like it's going to be a big hit. And I was talking about how this is really Timothée Chalamet already last year when he made A Complete Unknown. And as I mentioned, we've seen an issue with getting older audiences, adult audiences, to turn out in large numbers to see these type of films. And A Complete Unknown made around $140 million worldwide. Very good for that type of film. This film may end up making $200 million, which was not uncommon for a critically lauded adult-themed film 10 or 15 years ago. But this may be the only film this year that can play, at least in the United States, get this kind of box office. So it is possible that Timothée Chalamet has become one of our very few real movie stars. And that's Marty Supreme, and that's currently burning it up at the box office. Okay, my number 6 is Companion. I just talked about Zach Cregger in his film Weapons this year. He also produced this film, written and directed by Drew Hancock, available on HBO Max yet again, and also on Amazon Prime. And as I mentioned, if this is the better film for me than Weapons, as I mentioned, I have a personal bias, a younger director, writer-director, someone who's breaking the mold, and a film that has surprises, not only in the twists the plot takes in, but in breaking the mold as far as the genre goes, introducing me to younger actors or actors that are showing me something different. This film hit all those sweet spots. And again, going in blind, I didn't even watch a trailer for this film. I went with my wife on a date. We saw it at a preview screening. So I got to see it before all the critical consensus came in. And I think this is pretty well regarded, but probably more so by me. And like I said, go in there without knowing what this film is doing. Not unlike some of the other films I've called out here that were some of my personal preferences. It's a film that will surprise you, that changes its genre. It's a comedy. It's science fiction. It has elements of horror. It's a deconstruction of a rom-com. It's hilarious, if I didn't make that clear as well. And so smart, and plays with its ideas, develops its ideas without ever being cliched, and has terrific performances. Sophie Thatcher giving yet another terrific performance. She's really becoming a star that I'm always curious to see what she does next. And Jack Quaid weaponizing his eating grin to turn all those likable characteristics maybe a notch too likable. A little false, let's say. And Lucas Gage, someone who's popped up here and there. I've always been curious about him. An interesting performer, but it really surprised me here. Like really able to turn on a dime and break your heart a couple of times here in the film. And that's Companion. And it's available on HBO and Amazon Prime. Okay, my top 5. Number 5, Eddington. Ari Aster's new film. So many people hated this film. I liked it for all the reasons that a certain segment of the population really did not. It's a film that, again, it's a conspiracy thriller. It's a comedy. It's a horror film, tonally anyway. And nobody wanted to see this film, which was about the pandemic. This reaction was just like, why is he making this film about the pandemic? I don't want to think about the pandemic. But of course, the film is not about the pandemic at all. Emma Stone here once again. It is in many ways a modern Western, and thematically about what Westerns are oftentimes about. A train line is coming into town and is disrupting the local populace, manipulating them, turning them against each other, so that the bad guys who really work for the train company get to put their train line in. And in this modern world, it's not the train line that's getting installed. It is a giant data center. And like so many films that are on my list this year, it is about this toxic interaction that we have with each other online. What if that bled into the actual world? And of course, it correlates that that's exactly what happened in this year where Black Lives Matter movement came to the fore, but even more so, the performative nature of wearing masks or not wearing masks and how that became to symbolize other things. And this will piss you off in both directions politically, very much intentionally. And I think what Oster is doing here is very funny, extremely bleak, extremely cynical about the direction we're heading in, but I think very incisive. And I think if you give it another try, if you didn't enjoy it the first time around, or you've been wary about it, don't watch it as a COVID movie, because that's not what he's really interested in. He's more interested in how these performances that we have online, that we perform for each other, these kind of legal stances we take or moral stances we take, are really about trying to find others to coalesce around, but how that can also be weaponized against us by unseen conspiracists. Oh, Joaquin Phoenix gives another terrific performance here. And people really did not see this film. I think they judged it as a certain type of film without having seen it. And guess what, everybody? It's available on HBO Max. So check it out if you've been curious. All right, my number 4, we discussed it here on a podcast. This is just my most entertaining film of the year. There's nothing deep to discuss here other than like, hey, this is why I go to the movies. It's F1. Joseph Kosinski, again, incredibly technically proficient, coming off of his Top Gun Maverick success as well. I saw this on IMAX, but now I've seen it on Apple TV. By the way, just premiered recently on Apple TV if you haven't caught up with it yet. Watched it with the family during the holidays, 3 generations of family, and everybody was riveted to the screen. It's incredibly well made, thrilling. If you like sports films, and part of it is not only the competition, but like learning what it takes to within the sport itself, like what are the rules of engagement in the sport. I learned about F1. I loved this incredible high definition cinematography inside the car with the racers. Truly amazing experience in IMAX, but also a lot of fun to watch even at home. And I've seen it 3 times now, and I liked it all 3 times. I liked it just as much the third time around. So just that in and of itself is worthy of recommendation. And it's all the way up at number 4 for me because it was just the most fun I had mindlessly just in the moment of watching a film that I had all year. All right, my top 3. All 3 of these films, highly, highly recommended. Number 3 is Sorry Baby, available on HBO Max. So a pattern you've seen a couple of times here in my recommendations on these high up on my list. Written, directed, and starring Eva Victor, playing this character, Agnes. And as the movie opens, Agnes is still in this college town. We just discover this very intelligently. No one ever sits down and explains everything that's happened. Agnes still lives in her old college town, now a professor at the school where she was a student, visited by one of her friends who now lives in the city. And over the course of this very naturalistic and fun weekend they hang out together, we start to understand that something has happened in her past. And another incredibly humane film, but very funny, a very strange way, that is strange in the fact that I haven't seen it before, but not strange in execution, that dealing with this incredibly traumatic experience in a way I've never seen before, but seeing someone come out of this darkness in their lives through camaraderie, and not only that, through this awkward sexual relationship she has with the boy next door, slowly recovering from this trauma from her past, but also just these incredible moments, just these little moments that normally never would get presented in a movie, running into the proprietor of a sandwich shop and how he just makes a sandwich for her, understanding that there's this moment of need, and just the kindness being shown, and how the film, again, another great final scene, and how the film culminates in really just seeing someone coming through this period of their lives. Really such an impressive film for someone who, I think this is a debut film. So an incredible piece of work. Can't wait to see what Eva Victor does next. And again, that is Sorry Baby, available on HBO Max. Okay, my number 2 is No Other Choice. And this is from the South Korean master filmmaker Park Chan-wook. Just has opened in theaters in the US. I think getting exceptional word of mouth. It's only played in very limited right now. I think it's expanding this very week and is already a box office hit. A huge hit back in South Korea. And I can't wait until this goes more broadly. I think this is going to be a very big hit. I don't know if it's going to get Academy Award nominations, something that had been predicted earlier in the year. Maybe a little bit lost in the shuffle towards the end of the year here. In a year of films that warn us about the way that corporations use us and turn us against each other and conspire against us, this is yet another one, and maybe the most incisive one of them all, Again, a thriller, and again, a comedy, a very, very black comedy. Again, a reminder this year that time is a flat circle. This is actually an adaptation of a thriller from Donald Westlake, the writer of the Parker series of films. There was also a Parker, I should say books. There was also a Parker film adaptation this year. Not very good, but this is a very different type of film or I should say book for Westlake. And like so many other films, as I mentioned, that just tell us that history just keeps repeating itself. The original book is about someone in the 1980s who also works at a paper plant and is having his jobs outsourced. And in this case, also a paper plant employee, the manager of his team, this one in South Korea. And it's an American company that is downsizing his staff. And here's a book written in the 80s as a referendum on the Reagan era, resonating again as we start seeing that corporations are downsizing us and replacing us with technology some 40 years later. And of course, Marty Supreme, a film set in the 50s and yet full of music from the 1980s. It's just these patterns recursively repeating again and again. So here, a man dealing with losing his career, losing his place and status in the world. That man being played by Leigh Byung-hun, who was just in the final season of Squid Game, for example. Very recognizable Korean actor. And in this extremely black comedy, discovers that he's losing his job. We see him in this idyllic upper middle class home that he's made with his family. It's his ancestral home. He doesn't want to move. He doesn't want to inconvenience himself. He has made his nest and he is happy with his status in life and thinks that he is untouchable in his current career. As a matter of fact, prepares to tell his corporate overlords that he refuses to allow them to cut his staff at all, only to discover that he indeed is one of the people who's being cut. And of course, desperate times call for desperate measures. When it turns out that not only are there going to be far fewer people needed for these type of jobs in the future, that now there's going to be a glut of competitors out there due to all the corporate downsizing, he decides to put out an ad requesting people who have exactly the type of resume he would hire for that role. He makes up the shortlist based on the respondents and then decides there's only one thing he can do. He has to kill off his competition. And of course, this leads to a bunch of very funny set pieces. I won't tell you how things resolve, of course, but that's the setup. And this film is so clever. It's so beautifully constructed. Director Park Chan-wook, again, such a master. This is perhaps his fourth masterpiece of his career, maybe more. And the subtle ways it develops these different themes about this struggle of these people losing their place in this ever-expanding capitalistic economy. Of course, we've seen with Parasite and with so many recent South Korean masterpieces, an economy that in the past few decades has emerged to be this one of the largest in the world, and the culture shock to this very traditional culture, but of course resonating all over the world given these concerns of being outsourced around the world. And also it becomes an examination of his relationship with his wife as he starts to stalk these potential victims as he needs to replace them. And he starts to discover that they are all dealing with exactly the same things that he's dealing with: his life, his relationship with his kids, with his wife, with himself, his same critiques he has. And he starts to, in the same way that oftentimes we'll look at our children and see our shortcomings in them and how the irritant of it, that him seeing these people, observing these people and seeing the exact same flaws he has and refusing to accept them in those people, of course, though they represent the same exact flaws he sees in himself. So it becomes this exploration of this modern man in this world, in these changing things, dealing with this in a very negative way, of course, but always extremely entertainingly executed, incredible performances, wonderful tone management, beautiful and clever, constantly surprising visual storytelling here. And like so many other films this year, ending on a relatively mundane image that nonetheless feels utterly apocalyptic. Yet another one of those films. And you could watch this alongside Eddington. You can watch this alongside my number one film, which I won't spoil quite yet. You can watch this with Cloud. You can make a double, triple, quadruple feature with so many films on my list. But perhaps the best of these dark comedies. unless you pick my number one film as another dark comedy, which it absolutely is, among many other things. My number one film, not a contrarian here. I like to be a contrarian, oftentimes find a film like Twinless, for example, that very few people are bringing up that I think shouldn't be overlooked. I like to put things on the radar that aren't necessarily there, and I like to sometimes find the flaws in things that are considered masterworks. And by the way, I've had my issues with PTA, his films, in the past. I don't think they're all the genius works of art that everybody claims they are. I think they oftentimes have issues. But this year, he made One Battle After Another, and I was ready to not be completely on board with this film. I can't deny it. It is undeniable. Again, available on HBO Max, by the way. Just premiered recently. I just rewatched this with my wife. Just as thrilling rewatching it as it was in the theater. Darren and I have a full episode where we discuss it in detail. Perhaps my favorite of all of PTA's films. DiCaprio showing us things that he hasn't shown us before, especially in the role of this buffoonish father figure. Sean Penn, one of his career peak performances for sure. Chase Infinity emerging immediately as a star, going toe-to-toe with some of the powerhouse actors of this generation. Benicio del Toro, as I mentioned, with the Phoenician scheme, just what a year he had with this incredible charisma machine that he's become. Again, maybe at the peak of his powers. Teyana Taylor owning the first, amazing to rewatch the film and realize that she's only in maybe the first 20 to maybe 30 minutes of the movie. It really feels like she's so present in the rest of the film as well. You forget what a small but incredibly powerful, how important she is to the storyline. And Regina Hall as well. All of these folks could very well end up with Academy Award nominations, and well-deserved. But even the tertiary characters, this squad of cartoonish white supremacists as well. An amazing driving set piece that comes near the end of the film. And for me, this is a summarization of so many of PTA's interests. And not only does he get to tie together all of his themes, these broken families and this found family, these cults that we join primarily to find a place in the world, and a criticism of the fantasies that these stories tell us, the mythology that we try to create around the American dream, and how that is part of our requirement to keep striving and simultaneously maybe something that undermines us constantly. So not only is this all of his themes bundled up in the film, it also is all the themes of the movies I've described, this mixing of genres, this dark comedy mixed with action, this sense that we are all under the thumb of some conspiracy beyond us that we can't control. All the themes of the year and all the themes of PTA's career all culminating in this film. And for all those reasons, it's the movie of the year, and I think that it will stand the test of time. All right, so once again, check the backlog. We've talked about One Battle After Another. We've talked about F1. We've talked about Train Dreams. We've talked about Bring Her Back. And now we're going to add to that, we're going to talk about Bugonia. But first, I'm going to ask Darren about a whole bunch of movies he watched on his last week off. Went to the theater a whole bunch of times, watched a whole bunch of movies, some that are in cinemas right now. So let's get into that conversation. All right, Darren. So I've just run down I cheated a whole bunch of times, my top 20 movies, but then I had some movies that were actually from last year that I put onto this list. And then I squeezed another one on because I accidentally bumped one off. And then I had like just movies that to me are in the top 10, but maybe not just general recommendations. So it's, as usual with me, more than 20. But Bugonia is, not only was it on the list pretty much from the first time I saw it, but I actually moved up a little bit because when I heard you had watched it, I rewatched it. And also because I've been rewatching some of the things that are on my list before I made it, and I liked it even more the second time around. So I'm very curious to get your take on that film. Oh, and by the way, Susie out there, Susie knows who she is. Susie wanted a review of Bugonia. Here it is, Susie, doing a little fan service as well. But yeah, so very curious to have that discussion with you. But your holiday wrapped up, so curious to any other eventful things as you wrapped up your holiday. And of course, you sent me a list of things you've been watching, and I didn't watch anything else on your list, but I'm very curious to ask you about it. So first of all, how did your holiday wrap up? How are the kids acclimating to, are they back in school now also?
Oh, no, no, no. They're not back in school. There's another 4 weeks
Oh,
or
this is
so
summer
before
break,
they're
right? Right.
back in school. So, yeah, I'm back at work, unfortunately. But the last little bit of the holiday was really good. We got into a routine of going to the beach, big breakfast, watching a film at home or at the cinema, and having an afternoon nap, that kind of thing,
Oh, wow.
for
Listen
a
to
few
that.
days in a row. So it was just paradise, and that's the kind of thing that yeah that I aim for in my holidays. I just finished listening to your best of TV podcast. So yeah, you really bent the rules in some of those. I think there's about 50 things on that top 15 list. So and it was really good to hear wife put in some actual expert opinion on the pit, which was a bit of a surprise to see that at number one. But yeah, really good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I part of the reason, I mean, this is all personal lists. Part of the reason, of course, be putting it there was that I suddenly just had a hankering in the past few years for so many shows that have, I'm very excited to see them, and then they end on a season one cliffhanger, and then they never come back. Or worse than that, they'll be like, and this show's been renewed for a second season. And then 3 years go by, and they're like, actually, we're not renewing that after all. I'm like, well, that was not worth it. And just the pleasure of watching The Pit, which was just a week to week procedure, like old school TV, but actually gave you something additional to chew on. And so it has more text, subtext to it. But we watched this show. We watched some of it when the family was over. We had watched some of it during the summer when we were down in Florida visiting other family. So it's like you could just throw this on and watch one or two episodes. And at the same time, if you actually commit to it, you get even more out of it. So for me, it just like perfectly hit the spot. What is season two of The Pit, even if it's better, like the novelty of it, it's starting this week. We're going to be discussing it here on the podcast. Would it still score this high? It's definitely was a novelty of having this kind of TV again. So it was a real pleasure to watch it that way. The thing I looked forward to the most during that period of time when we were watching shows here on the podcast. But yeah, like it's the novelty of it. And by the way, just you'll hear my full breakdown of the movies I'm going to recommend, but a lot of them are just like just hit me the right way. Or I have a couple of movies that aren't even available to stream yet that I saw in one of those blind screenings that they have at some of the local theaters. And I walked in there knowing nothing about the movie and the best way to watch some of those movies. So that's just my personal experience of the film. So, or the show. So, of course, it's all our personal experiences.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing like going in blind, totally blind to
Truly blind.
films
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Yeah,
Like literally not
that's
knowing what the
great.
genre of the movie is when I walk in the door or who's going to be in it. And really, that's like such a pleasure.
Yeah, that's very cool. And the pit, you're not alone in the pit because I think it just won Critics' Choice
Yeah.
Awards
Mhm.
recently. So yeah, it's getting a lot of attention.
All right. So, Darren, you gave me a list of things you'd watched. You'd watched
Mm.
Bugonia, of course, which we will be discussing in great detail. And now I'm looking at your message to me, your list of things. First of all, I didn't get around to watching this when before I knew you had watched Bugonia. And of course, we'll be discussing. Oh, maybe I'll just announce it right now. By the way, we will be watching on the podcast next week, a week from now, when this is publishing. We'll be discussing Industry, the first episode of the most recent season of Industry. It's premiering on HBO Max next Sunday. That's East Coast US time. But so coordinate accordingly, check your apps to know what that means for the rest of you around the world. But we'll be discussing that next week, and Darren and I will be going week to week on it. And of course, a gap in the calendar this week. So we had already discussed end of year type conversations as well. So I'm like, well, you know what? The worst, unanimously, the worst, not only the worst rated film of the year, it maybe of multiple years, was this Ice Cube adaptation available on Amazon Prime of War of the Worlds, which I didn't get around to seeing because once you said Begonia, I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. But as soon as I brought up, like, hey, maybe we can watch this just for fun, you're like, I already watched it.
You must have hit me up at the right time because
Just the right moment.
it was nap time and I put War of the Worlds with Ice Cube on. And I must admit, I did think I did snooze a couple of times. But my biggest takeaway, yes, it's terrible, but it's not as bad as people are saying. And one of my guilty pleasures is a movie called Searching,
Mm.
which stars John Chu. It came out a few
Hmm.
years ago, and it is all told from the perspective of his laptop or his mobile phone or other people's mobile phones. And I think it's a cool conceit when done correctly. And this War of the Worlds, because it was originally what it became famous as a book, but then a radio play by Orson Welles. So it kind of lends itself to this way of telling the story, which I thought was interesting. But yes, it goes down a few different paths that are terrible. It looks like Ice Cube just filmed it in a weekend in his basement. And there's some weird things in it. But yeah, my daughter came in halfway through and I was like, this is the worst reviewed movie of the year. And she's like, I don't know why people are saying that. It's actually quite interesting.
I
So we
guess if
had
you
fun
know
watching
nothing
it.
about the story at all, I guess it's like your first approach to the story. Maybe it's not as bad.
But my goodness, there is some shameless Amazon advertising in it. I think it's saved by a guy who uses a Amazon drone to ferry a USB. Oh, look, it's crazy, but hey, I kind of enjoyed watching it.
Was it like so bad it's good, or was it just kind of good? Would you say?
Yeah, probably so bad it's good. But look, I like Ice Cube. I just think he's fun to see, and I just think from where he's come from as this gangster rapper all through his film career, I think he's an interesting dude.
I mean, he's a good actor. He's given some terrific performances. Actually, now I think he's kind of just coasting on being Ice Cube. And there's some good performances in there. I mean, he was in the voice performance of the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He plays the
Mhm.
villain, and I thought he was great in that. But I mean, back in the day, like when he did Menace to Society and Higher Learning, those are
Mm.
real performances. But that's pretty early in his career. So anyway, I definitely think he could be talented. But I just once again have not seen the movie, so I'm not going to judge it. But I did listen to a podcast where they were talking about the worst movies of the year, and they did play a piece of dialogue where he seems to be reading the dialogue like that moment for the very first time off of the screen, and I was like, wow, that is maybe the worst line delivery. And it's like a very technical line delivery, but it's like he's never seen this text before. The sentences are broken in the wrong place. I'm like, wow, you didn't even do a second take. Like, what is going on?
I believe that. And it's kind of part of the charm, I think.
I am a fan of So Bad It's Good movies, so that was something I was definitely planning to watch, and now I'm maybe even more likely to watch
You'll hate it. You
it.
will
I
hate
might like just give up
it.
after half an hour and be like, this is unwatchable. But we'll see. Like I said, there's plenty of So Bad They're Good movies in my backlog. So
And that's a nice segue with Ice Cube into the remake, reimagining, reboot sequel for Anaconda, which I also saw at the cinema, which I actually quite dug. I had a lot of fun with it. I like Paul Rudd playing Paul Rudd, Jack Black playing Jack Black. I like those guys, and it was super fun. It was just a fun summer movie. I mean, it's our summer, it's your winter, so maybe your mileage may vary. But I like films about making films.
mhm.
And it reminded me of Bowfinger. Maybe it's not as good as Bowfinger. I've
Yeah.
rewatched that numerous times. I probably won't watch Anaconda as many times, but I do like just this misfit band of people. Kind of their careers have maybe passed them by, and they get together to kind of relive their joy of making movies. And yeah, I quite enjoyed it.
I have an aversion to the film based on the trailer only because it felt like, first of all, these are such famous people pretending to be like not famous people, which could work on some level, I guess, if they were like really into the meta narrative of this whole thing, which of course is what they're trying to do.
Mhm.
And I mean, from what I've heard, it's supposed to be more about like a midlife crisis type comedy, which just also happens to have a giant anaconda snake in it. And the anaconda effects were pretty bad the first time around, but this it looks even worse somehow, which I guess maybe is part of the charm. But you know what? The critics have not loved this. The audience reaction has been better, but not great. But you know what? they're doing something right because this movie has become a big hit, like in the US and overseas as well. I think it's already over $100 million, and it hasn't even opened in a lot of places overseas. So this is going to be a pretty solid hit. And you know what's fascinating to me, by the way? Jack Black is maybe our biggest movie star somehow. I don't know
Mm,
how this happened, but like you think between like he opened this movie, obviously, where he's actually on the camera, but you think about the Mario Brothers movie, you think about the Jumanji films. These are all billion-dollar franchises, and the Minecraft movie, another billion-dollar franchise.
mm.
So he's been like multiple billion. Oh, and he had the Panda movie this year too. So he's got like massive, massive franchises, multiple of these franchises, all ongoing. And even when he pops up in a comedy that doesn't cost that much money, like this Anaconda film, it makes a couple $100 million worldwide, probably end up around there. And like this guy is a huge star. You could forget that what a big star this guy is.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I remember seeing him in, I think School of Rock was probably the first time that I thought this guy has it all. And that's one of my favorite movies of all time, I think. I just, for some reason, I just enjoy watching these kids pick up instruments and learn to play rock and roll. It's so, so much fun. But yeah, I mean, he's the star of the movie. He's just the same old Jack Black that he was 20 years ago. And it's just fun watching him on screen. It's just what you're going to get. And yeah, fun movie.
I think the first time I ever saw him in anything, I mean, my friends were like huge fans of Tenacious D, so we had heard his music before. But the first movie I saw him in was in High Fidelity, which is one of my favorite movies at that time, was maybe my favorite film the year I saw it. And I was much younger at the time. But I loved that and that was another film that I just watched over and over again. As someone who you can imagine, hey, someone who loves listening to music and making lists all the time, of course, specifically talk to me. And but yeah, great in that. And of course, then he has that a few years later, maybe 5, 6 years later, he has that massive breakout when he makes School of Rock, which is a huge hit.
Yeah, I actually caught the Cable Guy on TV just recently, and he is actually a bit part in the Cable
Yeah.
Guy, kind of playing a best friend kind of thing. So, yeah, you can see how far he's come, and yeah, all power to him. Man, opening these billion-dollar movies is just insane.
Speaking of someone else who can open a movie, this past year, Sydney Sweeney, a lot of questions as to like whether she was a real star or not. She had some hits and then she had some misses, and then she had that marketing campaign that everybody was talking about. And but
Mm.
the movie everybody really wanted to see her in, and there's a lot of buzz about it all year long, was The Housemaid. And it opens, and this movie, even bigger than Anaconda, is a huge hit and is really turning into a massive hit here in the US. And I think around the world is doing very well as well, and still has many places to open. So this is going to be another huge hit for her. And this is based on a series of books. So I'm sure there'll be a sequel if this movie makes as much money as it looks like it's going to end up making. So you saw this. You saw it with your wife. You saw it by yourself.
Yeah, I saw it with the wife. Yeah, I think the kids were driving us around the bend, and I said, "There's a 2 o'clock session of Housemaid. Let's get out of the house. Let's go see this." And she was all for it. And we had a great time in the cinema. It's not a short film; it's like 2.5 hours long, which I
Wow.
was a little bit wary about. And it also is directed by Paul Feig, which
Mhm.
I was also a little wary about because of some of his history. But I did really like going back to Bridesmaids. I thought that's a really, really fun comedy. And yeah, he hits it out of the park with this one. It's very entertaining. Sydney Sweeney is not, she's great in it, don't get me wrong, but Amanda Seyfried
Yeah.
steals the film. She is stunning in it. She goes all out playing this crazy housewife. And there is a few twists and turns, some of which are telegraphed early on, and some of which don't really make a lot of sense when you kind of follow the performances. And it's also got a guy, Brendan Scalar or something. So it's like a three-hander. And we
Mhm.
saw him in the movie Drop
Yeah.
this year. So he plays quite a fun role. But yeah, really, really fun film. Great to see women go all out. And Sydney Sweeney, she shows off her assets again. There must be some kind of contract in her
That's
in her
part of
films. And
the appeal always, right?
and hey, we walked into the cinema. I think I picked three dudes in the cinema. The rest were all women. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, maybe I'm in for something here. But yeah, there's a little bit of fan service for the guys there.
For those who show up. I think this book is, I mean, maybe now it's just crossing over to broader audience, but I think initially this is based on a very popular book series, and I think it's very much like this chick lit type genre. So probably the brand awareness is probably among those of that audience first foremost.
And Sydney Sweeney's great as well. Like, she doesn't have to be the star. Like, it's
Right.
very clear that she lets Amanda Seyfried do the heavy lifting and go all out when she needs to. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Sydney Sweeney. I've seen her in plenty of films the last couple of years, as we all have. And I can't really think of a bad performance.
She's in that new movie coming out about the Shaker movement from the folks who made the Brutalist, and she's basically won all the or shortlisted for all of the major awards for Best Actress, Amanda Seyfried, that is. So I expect that we'll be seeing her get an Oscar nomination this year for that as well.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, great.
Which I have not seen. It's a very limited release right now, but I'll try to see that. There's a couple of things that didn't make my list that I haven't had a chance to see. One of them I could have seen, which is The Secret Agent with Wagner Moura is almost certainly going to get Best Actor nomination. And then there's this, which I can't read, The Testament of Anne Leigh, I think it's called, the Amanda Seyfried performance. And that's not coming out for like another 2 or 3 weeks in wide release. So that one I couldn't have seen, but I could have seen Secret Agent, which is playing right down the street from where I live, but just didn't have time to cut out. Yeah, I had the time. I just didn't do it. But I'm like, you know what? We will regroup when the Academy Awards come out in like a month or so. And anything I missed that pops up on that long list, I'll circle back to and we can have a follow-up conversation.
Yeah, The Secret Agent's playing at a film festival here tomorrow night, so I might try to check it out, but it doesn't really look like a great date movie. It looks a little bit more like a spy thriller, but it's a bummer that all the great films come out in December
All at the
or
same
January.
time. Yep.
It's very difficult to make a list if you have not seen all of them.
Another film that I did get to see that I will not get into too much detail here with you because we'll discuss it once you get a chance to see it because I think it's coming out next week or maybe even 2 weeks from now. But I did see Marty Supreme, which I had a very interesting relationship with this movie, by the way. I gave it 4 stars. And yet, because I had some serious problems with my read of the film, that I didn't even put it on my top 20, even though it was undeniable that it's such an incredibly well-made film with so many, every sequence is just like another set piece, an incredible set piece and just perfectly made. So I'm like, and his performance is great yet again. Timothée Chalamet, amazing again. So I'm like, well, I have to give it 4 stars, but I don't know if I can put it in my top 20. And then the very strange thing happened, which never, ever happens. I oftentimes will listen to a filmmaker talk about their work, but it doesn't really change my opinion of the work. I heard an interview with Safdie after watching the film, and he was so incredibly thoughtful about all the things that I thought he was not. I thought he was just shoehorning things into the film, just set in the 1950s and kind of playing with certain imagery that he didn't really, just threw it in there for the sake of, for the style or the look of it without thinking about what it might mean, like how you might interpret it. I'm being very vague here. We'll wait until you see the film. But anyway, long story short is then I read this interview with him, and he was so thoughtful about everything in the film and the amount of research he did. He had like backstories for all the characters. And I actually ended up moving the movie all the way up into my top 10 after hearing his interview. It made me actually appreciate the film even more. So anyway, very rare occurrence, but I can't wait till you see it. It's a really an incredibly this is another time where Chalamet is in New York City, not in the 1960s, immediately after making the Complete Unknown in the 1960s, playing Dylan. He transitions to playing 1950s, also in New York, and in another incredible recreation of New York City in the 50s. Like every detail is actually impeccable. And anyway, so it's really an amazing production, and I can't wait till you get to see it.
Really keen. So is this a Safdie brothers movie or it's just Josh Safdie?
It's just Josh. His brother went off to make what's the other
Smashing
movie?
Machine.
Smashing Machine, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they worked apart. But by the way, interesting point that you may appreciate here, that I didn't realize this until I was doing some research on If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. I don't know if that's the right title. I always get that title wrong.
Yep, I think that's right.
That the writer and director of that film, Mary Bronstein, is married to, I got to get his name right.
He's the producer on the Safdie brothers films, isn't he? I think I did say that.
Ronald Bronstein, right? Ron Bronstein, who is a producer, yes, but also the co-writer of Uncut Gems and Marty Supreme, and also co-writer on Good Time. So it's just funny thinking about that, because when I saw the Rose Byrne film, I was like, this, even though the situation is so much more mundane, I was like hyperventilating the constant stress of the filmmaking with her film. And of course, I called it like for motherhood, like Uncut Gems, but for motherhood or something like to the in those, unaware, of course, at the time when I said that, unaware that she's actually married to Ron, who's a co-writer on some of those very films, those Safdie brother films. So anyway, that's a very stressful household, I would assume.
Constantly working out their angst.
Or maybe they take it all out in the art and they're actually very chill. Who knows? Who knows? So I definitely did want to see, by the way, definitely want to see The Housemaid. So maybe I'll get around to that as well.
Yeah, it's
a good date
trashy
movie for sure.
fun.
Oh yeah,
Definitely,
I mean
definitely.
that's the assumption.
Yeah.
If it was not trashy fun, then I would be very disappointed.
It reminded me of, was it the Girlfriend or The Perfect Girlfriend or something that was on Amazon Prime this year? The Girlfriend, I think.
The
It reminded me a
Girlfriend?
lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also another series called Sweet Pea, which we
Oh
watched with
yeah.
Ella
Mhm.
Purnell. Yeah. That kind of, trashy stuff that is super fun and
I was
gives
a
a
big
lot of
fan
room
of
for.
Sweet Pea, more so than I was of The Girlfriend. I wanted to like The Girlfriend more than I ended up liking it, but I did like Sweet Pea a great deal.
Yeah.
That's coming back for a second season, by the way, this year as well.
Great. Yeah, that was a nice quick binge.
Oh, and of course, one more thing you saw, which I really like this film, by the way. I didn't put it, I maybe could have, I have this very long list of films that I like this year that I may put into some other content somewhere, but I didn't put it on that list, but I probably should have, because I did like it better than some of the other films I shouted out. I have like a whole section of films that I'm like, didn't quite fully work for me, but really appreciated parts of it. And you saw, what's it called? The Seth Rogen film
Oh, is this the Aziz
with
Ansari
Aziz. Yeah.
Good Fortune?
Good Fortune. Yeah.
Yeah, didn't completely work for me, I must
Okay.
say, but I'm a big fan of Aziz. His TV show Master of None, I think it was called.
Yep.
Brilliant. I thought it was brilliant. Some of those episodes are just standalone pieces of art. I thought they're really funny, really very striking in his view of the world. And I was hoping to get that from this movie, which he wrote and directed and starred in. And we do get a bit of that, but it didn't work for me. Especially, it was Keanu Reeves as an angel. I just didn't think that whole kind of conceit didn't work for me. I did enjoy the kind of trading places with Aziz and Seth Rogen's kind of rich, privileged character. I thought that was all fun, but yeah, ultimately, yeah, led me to fall asleep.
Oh, really? Okay. I really liked it. I thought it was really fun and very sweet. Its heart's in the right place, but the comedy worked for me. Like I really loved the performance of all the performances, but I really loved Keanu Reeves' performance specifically. I like the naive way that he's like saying like, "Oh, I'm going to make you switch. See, it's not so great to be rich, isn't it?" And he's just like, "Are you crazy? I'm never going back." And he's like, "Oh." Yeah, so that conceit I thought was very fun. I do agree, by the way, that like I think Aziz has been very ambitious and experimental with his TV work. This is very cliche, not cliche, but it's very warm and expected. And there are some surprises. The comedy and some of the plot turns are a little surprising. Not don't go exactly as you expect, but it's a very warm and kind-hearted and big-hearted film. There's nothing really challenging about the material in any way. But I really I like all the character actors who play these secondary angels that just pop up for one or two scenes. They're all these people that are great to see, like these really great character actors. I know in general, for the most part, I really enjoyed the film.
That's good. Yeah, I think I'm a bit of an outlier on that. As I was looking at Letterboxd, it was getting a lot higher reviews than I was giving it. So yeah, that's definitely one for people to seek out. I did like Kiki Palmer. She's showing up in all sorts of
She's
different
great. Yeah, I
films.
really like her too.
She's so good. Every time I see her, she's so good.
All right, but with that out of the way, primarily I want to talk to you about Bugonia, which I did think was one of the better films of the year, and also I've been a little bit off on Yorgos. A couple of films, well, his most recent films. This is 3 films in 3 years he's made. Didn't really like the first two of those three. So I kind of had a chip on my shoulder, expecting that maybe I'm not really going to dig this. Also, this is a remake of a movie I was familiar with, Save the Green Planet, a Korean horror thriller comedy from more than a decade ago, probably 15 years ago, that always, even though it's not perfect and it's pretty low budget, it actually has some really clever plot turns. As a matter of fact, the plot is almost identical. But long story short is I go see this, and this is the better version of the story, even as a remake. And I really like this. Tell me I could tell from your Letterboxd 4 stars that you liked it, maybe even more than I did. But tell me what you thought of it.
I really loved it. I thought it was a fantastic, very entertaining film. As you say, it's a black comedy. It's a bit horror. It's a bit thriller. It's got everything thrown in the mix. And even though it's got a whole lot of themes that you can drag out of it, you can just watch it as a straight thriller. I was not familiar with Save the Green Planet, but I'm a fan of some of Yorgos's work, and my wife was a massive fan of Poor Things. She drove me to see Poor Things in the cinema last year, and I appreciated it, but it didn't fully engage with it. But this Bugonia was a brilliant film. I think it's definitely my top 10 for the year, maybe pushing top 5. Really, really had fun with it and was shocked by it and was scared by it. And yeah, so much in this film to enjoy, especially Jesse Plemons, who
Yes,
acts,
incredible.
rings. Oh, just amazing. If he's not in the conversation for Best Actor, then something's wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting that he's kind of faded out, but I remember when this movie came out and I had seen it back in October or November, but probably October, I think, when it came out wide here in the US. And immediately the conversation was Jesse Plemons is definitely getting a nomination. He might even win. And I feel like maybe just because it opened a little too soon, this movie in general, I feel like it's so weird when they release films and like you start thinking like this is going to be in the conversation at the end of the year. And then so many things come out and the conversation keeps changing every week. And I feel like this might not make the cut anymore, including, I mean, I never really thought the film was a guaranteed to be nominated, although I would be happy to see it in there. But the performance, I mean, this, and by the way, first time around, I'm like, Jesse Plemons, holy cow, knocked my socks off. One of my favorite actors anyway, but so impressed with this. This is maybe my favorite performance I've ever seen him in. And that's saying a lot because I love him in almost everything. And of course, I love Emma Stone, by the way, probably my favorite actress of that generation she's my favorite. And again, I'm like, yeah, she's great. I kind of just took it for granted that she was great. I just rewatched this last night in preparation for this conversation. And of course, the juice in this is those conversations between him and her. And I got to tell you, I really, as great as he is, and he definitely deserves all the accolades, I kind of didn't fully appreciate her performance until seeing it the second time. She's like really incredible in all those confrontations between the two of them.
That's great to hear. I'm actually really looking forward to watching it a second time. I almost put it on the night after I watched it because I was so interested in seeing it again. But yeah, she is a powerhouse. And does she ever have a bad performance? I don't know. But yeah, shaving her head and looking the way she does and acting as this kind of top shelf CEO tech person, highly educated, against this guy, Jesse Plemons, who is just looks like he needs a shower in every scene.
So dirty.
The greasy hair, just it was really a pleasure to watch. I mean, last thing I saw him was Civil War, I think, which he was just disgusting, just so evil in. I think he was only in one scene, but so striking in that film, and then coming back with a big, like almost a leading man, or definitely a leading man performance in this. Yeah, what a legend.
Yeah, he's incredible. I can't wait to see him. And by the way, I actually gave Poor Things a solid review on Letterboxd, but my thing I disliked the most in the film, obviously her performance is terrific. I didn't like the adaptation of the book. I think I've recommended this. You should definitely have your wife read that book. The adaptation of the book is really just the center of the book. The opening section of that book is really like a satire on the medical industry. And I told my wife she has to definitely read that book, given like her complaints about the business she's in. And then the last section is like a refutation of what you see in the middle, saying like, that's not true. This is the real story, right? And the movie adaptation is just the center of the book, which doesn't have that context resetting from the other parts of the book. So for me, it was a disappointing adaptation given that. And I didn't understand the point of cutting out the other stuff, which provides all the context for the story. But for me, the worst thing about that film was Yorgos, like everything, he's suddenly a fisheye and he's changing the film stock and everything's in black and white. And there's all these weird stylizations that for me just were distracting. Like the whole film is so artificial as it is. Do we need this additional stuff? So I was really getting tired of what he was doing stylistically. And then he made Kinds of Kindness, which I don't think you've seen. Have you seen Kinds of Kindness?
I have not seen that yet. No.
I hated it. It's an anthology. It has 3 stories, and I kept waiting for one of them to be good because I'm kind of forgiving if one of them is good. I didn't like it. I didn't like how the stories interlock. There's a joke at the end where you understand how the stories fit together, which is actually very funny. One joke. The movie's 3 hours and 15 minutes long. It's got one joke that works. And I really didn't like it. I didn't like all the stylistic sauce he was putting on there, which did nothing but distract me from this story. I felt like he had really lost his way. So I was really in a bad spot with him going to see this movie. Oh, but one thing I want to shout out is that that anthology, she's in it, Emma Stone's in it, and he's in it. Jesse Plemons is in it, and other people as well. Willem Dafoe, a bunch of other people, all the regulars actually from his other films. But they play different characters in each one of these anthologies. Jesse Plemons plays a different character in all 3 of the stories. He's incredible. He's remarkable. His performance is so amazing. And it's almost worth that movie I don't like at all. It's almost worth watching for his work. So that really worked. And I'm glad that they carried over to this film. But way more importantly is that, and maybe he himself, the director, realized that he's kind of getting to the end of the rope with all those stylistic flourishes, because there is this black and white, which I really don't like, by the way, in this movie, those black and white sequences where we see the backstory to Plemons' character and his mom, played by Alicia Silverstone, those sequences really, I don't really like. But the rest of the film is in this very naturalistic tone. It's like the most naturalistic style he's probably ever had in any of his films. And I thought it made the material so much better. Like he allows that the interior of that house that's like so dilapidated. And like you said, Plemons himself just looks like he has not showered in weeks. And there's like, it grounds this crazy. I mean, this story is absolutely crazy. And what I was afraid of, given my familiarity with the original film, was that this is such a crazy story. We don't need to have everything in fisheye lens. And that's what I was worried about. But instead, he really grounds it in this almost the realistic tone, which I thought was fantastic. The score is fantastic, by the way, also just incredible. Everything technically here, I think, is aces across the board.
The score, the bombastic score, yes, especially towards the end, is so notable. I tried to find out who does the music for it, but I couldn't really work that out. But yeah, very notable. And that's interesting you say that about the kind of art house, black and white, fisheye stuff, because it was noticeable in this film, and it stood out as in, should I be deriving more meaning from this because it's in black and white and there's something floating, or there's something a little bit artificial. And as you say, it's not really that necessary because everything else is shot quite straight. What else was I going to say about it? Oh yes, the other actor. It's almost a three-hander, but this other actor doesn't say much. I'm not sure of his name, but he's an autistic actor.
Yeah.
And I read an interview with him. He said he got the role, but he'd never heard of Yorgos or Emma Stone or Jesse Plemons. But he was like very keen to play the role. And he's very naturalistic, of course, because I don't know, they just have a way with acting. We've been watching, what's it called? Love on the Spectrum, which is one of my favorite TV shows. It makes me so happy watching this show because these people just, they're so alive and they say exactly what they feel. There's no artifice. And yeah, he really came through as quite truthful in this film.
Yeah, it's the heartbreaking. Some scenes he's there, and it, like you mentioned, you could be, and this is where I like that there's not the artifice. Again, in my first time watching the film, I appreciated it so much more the second time around because I'm going in the first time with this chip on my shoulders around shoulder over my relationship with Yorgos from the last couple of films. Although I'm going to go through his filmography, there's plenty of films in there that I like. And then I see this person who's on the spectrum by neurodivergent, how he classifies himself, and that I was worried. I'm like, oh, this is going to be like a big clowny type. And once again, this is what I think worked so well, and maybe part of the reason that the tone is so naturalistic, because the interactions between him and Jesse Plemons, who's obviously a trained actor, there's none of the, quotation marks around their interactions with each other. It's all played very straight. And again, of course, when Emma Stone is down in the basement and speaking to him as well, I loved all of that. I think it was very well done. And once again, I was so worried. I'm like, oh man, this is going to be, he's going to be like a freak show or something in the context of this weird storyline. And not at all. They make him a really sympathetic and fully rounded character, and he gives a real performance. And his interactions with everybody are so naturalistic. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, absolutely.
We break down the story a little bit because this is so crazy. It's the first 10 minutes. We have a cold open before the title comes up. And we see, first of all, do you know what Bugonia is? Do you know what that is?
No, tell me.
It's so strange because, of course, when I heard the title, I didn't even look at the spelling. And I'm like, oh, Bugonia, like the flower. And in the trailer, you'd seen some flowers, of course, because of the honeybee metaphor there as well. And the plot point of having honeybees as well, beyond its metaphor, although it's metaphorical as well. But I'm like, no, it's spelled Bugonia, which is a word I did not know. And then I looked it up, and Bugonia was an old, like, Greek belief that if you had colony collapse, if your bees were dying off, that they believed that if you killed a deer, I'm thinking of the movie, if you killed a cow and left its innards out, that the bees would spontaneously spawn from the rotting corpses of the cows. And there's an explanation to this, by the way, that there are certain flies, these very large flies, that were they mistook those for bees. But this is back when, many years ago, they did believe in like spontaneous generation of life, that like mice appeared. You would leave food out, and then suddenly you would be infested with mice. And they're like, oh, the mice grew from the rice. Like, they didn't understand how these things worked back then. So apparently it's a similar idea. But it's interesting when you think about that, because of course you have this idea that from something dying, you have the colony. Of course, he's very concerned with colony collapse as well. And then you have this, everybody circles around the queen. They have to do what the queen says. In the opening narration, he talks about how they turn on the queen, and that's why the colony collapses. So of course that becomes a metaphor over the course of the film as well. And also the idea that like this fly that's not really a bee gets mistaken for a bee. So this whole idea that he sees, no, it's not a bee, it's a fly. And the whole idea that it's not a person, it's an alien. Because of course, this is what the film is about, by the way, everybody, if you're not familiar. This Jesse Plemons character who's gone into so many rabbit holes. He even says it himself. He's like, I was on the right, I was on the left, I've been an alt-right person. He's been on every kind of political spectrum, but now he's just a pure conspiracy theorist. And he believes that the reason that the world is going to hell is because there are actually these aliens that are in these powerful corporate positions, and that his job is to take them down. And his current target is this girl boss CEO. Incredible satire here, by the way. Emma Stone doing all this kind of like, you can leave at 5 o'clock if you don't have anything else to do, but only if you really don't have to. It's all up to you, but really don't do it. So just this idea of like being this like kind of saying the right things, but it's all this corporate speak. And she's very much an exemplar of that type of person that we see in culture all the time, and speaking that particular way. And then of course, like still in this cold open, we see her whole daily routine. We see his daily routine. He shows up at her house, they kidnap her, and then boom, title card, Bugonia. So that's the opening of the film. And that's the setup. And from that point on, they have her in the basement of this place they fortified. And there's just these interactions. You could almost do this as a stage play, like you mentioned, where they are going back and forth. And at first, she's just denying overtly. And then she starts saying, well, maybe she's playing along or maybe he's right. And there's all these weird little clues. And then as you watch it, you keep asking yourself, like, is he crazy or is this true? What's your experience of it as you're watching the film the first time through? Did you think he's just completely off his rocker? Did you think there's any possibility that this is actually happening? What were you, without spoiling things yet? Let's not spoil things yet. But what was your experience of it as you're seeing these interactions?
I think he's very convincing, and I feel like he's been on holiday in Eddington because
Oh,
there's
yes.
a lot of conspiracy theories that tie in with that film. And I did notice Ari Aster's
Yep.
name, the writer and director of Eddington, his name in the credits as a producer. So that kind of you could watch these films as a double header and really feel great about your life.
That's a
I
good
definitely
point.
thought he was very convincing. Yeah, for sure. Because, and his poor cousin who he
Yeah.
convinces to do a few things that are just devastating because he's right on board. And even though his cousin does question him a couple of times, are you sure this is the right thing to do? Is you sure this is what we should do? Plemons is unwavering in his belief that Emma Stone is an alien and that he needs to stop. Well, what he wants to travel to her ship at the
To
the
negotiate with
equinox
the
or
emperor. Oh
something.
yeah, during the eclipse, right?
Doing it, yeah, and so the film almost counts down the days till the eclipse when this can possibly happen, when he can go to the alien spaceship to negotiate to save the bees.
Did you notice, by the way, that when the film begins, it's 3 days to the eclipse, and the Earth is round, of course, and is facing us directly. But as it approaches the eclipse, right, where the sun will be blacked out, that it turns out that model of the world is a flat Earth. So it's actually laying completely flat. So it's like one more conspiracy to throw into the mix that the Earth is actually flat as well.
There's so many conspiracies. People are going to love this or hate it
Or hate
because
it,
of
right?
the way they dismantle these conspiracies or not.
Yeah, speaking of I think you're absolutely correct. This is of a piece with other films that had to do with these broad conspiracies as well. One battle after yet another film this year, but so many conspiracy thrillers this year. And I think in the same way that when we had so many conspiracy thrillers in the 70s, where it was after Watergate and people started to ask questions like, does my vote matter? We went to this war that I don't approve of, and the government's been lying to me. And everyone just kind of felt like had no control over these powers beyond they felt were controlling the world. I think we're back in that situation again now. Whether you're on the left or the right, people just feel like the world is completely out of their control. And I think we're going to keep seeing even more conspiracy thriller films. And we saw a whole bunch of them just this very year. I mean, The Secret Agent is yet another conspiracy thriller. But the Ari Aster connection. So the Yorgos has written all of his films initially, like Dogtooth and Alps and Killing of a Sacred Deer and The Lobster. He wrote all those films with his co-writer. I'm going to get the name wrong, but F. Themius Filippo. And then he worked with Tony McNamara when he made The Favorite. And then also Tony McNamara also wrote Poor Things. So these are his two writing partners. Now, the reason I bring this all up is that he did not co-write at all, was not involved in the writing at all of this particular film. This was brought to him by Ari Aster, like you mentioned. And of course, Aster probably was like, well, I'm making Eddington. This is a little too similar. plus, he writes his own scripts as well. Aster does, up until this point anyway. And this was actually written by Will Tracy. Will Tracy wrote The movie The Menu, and was also one of the writers on Succession. So you kind of get that flavor, no pun intended, of The Menu here too. This kind of satire of this upper class. So that's in there as well. But then, of course, you could think about the way that The Menu had a particular style. This film goes really the opposite direction in making this very earthy and grungy and tangible. And I think this is very much what Yorgos brings to the film. And I think it is good for the material. It actually helps the material a lot. I
Yeah, I
do
did
want to have
notice.
a
I love
spoiler
the menu.
section. You did.
I love the menu. So yeah, I was interested to see Will Tracy's name on this, but I am interested into how it's similar. I mean, because this is a remake, right? So how
Right.
similar is it to the original Korean film? Does it have all this conspiracy stuff in there, or is it just a different vibe?
It feels very different. You can watch this. You can watch it, by the way. I rewatched it before earlier this year in anticipation of Bugonia. And it's available on Hoopla, which is one of these library apps, which is also available in Australia, by the way. So if you wanted to watch it for free, it's available there. The feel of the film is very different. Stylistically, it feels very different. And this is a much bigger budget film. But plot points, this is why I had actually mentioned on the podcast that after having seen Bugonia, I was like telling people, hey, if you want to see this, I'm sure it's going to be a loose adaptation. So go ahead, go watch Save the Green World if you want to, right? And then the Green Planet, I should say. And then after I saw Bugonia, I'm like, do not watch Save the Green Planet
Oh.
because it is. I do think this is the better film. This is the better. It has more, especially thematically. It has, especially because it's in our current day and it takes place in the United States. It has a lot more resonance, especially to this kind of conspiracy culture that we all live in now. So I thought it was the better version of the story. But to your point, it is the same story. There's an abduction early on. There is a slapstick tackling the guy to the ground. He has an assistant who's his girlfriend who has this unrequited love for him, that they're not actually boyfriend and girlfriend, but she has this unrequited love for him. And she's a tragic figure in that story. The characters have very different trajectories, but it still serves the same kind of plot purpose. There is all these same exact moments. He has to shave off his hair for the same reasons. He tortures him for the same reasons. They go back and forth, and he's and you ask yourself the same questions. Is he just playing along now? Is this real? How did he know that piece of information? But it's like, well, he did find that log, that book with all the notes, so he could have just read it from there to know what he's talking about, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very much plot point for plot point the same. And I'm not going to spoil this movie, but we should have a spoiler section. The end is the same. It's the same ending. So
Yeah, it will be fun to spoil because we
it's
really
also
need
fun
to
to
talk
spoil
about
because I have questions about what happens at the end. So
All right, so let's do this. Shall we do this now? Tune out if if you don't want this movie spoiled for you.
yeah, let's do the spoiler section. So yeah, so we're going to spoil the movie. Just assume everything beyond here is going to be spoilers. Okay, so honestly, even seeing it a second time, I don't buy. Maybe that's the question. Do you buy that the ending is literally true?
I do because I wanted it to be true throughout the film. I thought I was not surprised by the ending, but I was thrilled by it. It's so great to finally see that everything that Jesse Plemons has been saying is true, and that she is actually an alien from Andromeda. And not only that, she's the queen, right? She's
She's
the
the queen.
leader.
Exactly.
So funny. And yes, I'm sure you're a very smart man. You can make a metaphor of why it is probably means something else and is not actually true. But I was just so thrilled to see her. By the way, when she kills Jesse Plemons, his head comes flying out
Oh
and
my
hits
God.
her.
So hilarious. Both times, but the first time I saw it, truly the one, because I'd seen everything in the film, plot points. Also, all the shocks are all there from the first film. But the one thing that is not there, and I don't know if it's in the script or if this was just Yorgos going off book, but when he accidentally detonates in the closet and his head goes flying through the air and smashes right into her head, I laughed so hard.
I was laughing. I was just absolutely shocked.
It's one of the craziest things. I mean, it's obviously shocking and grotesque, right? You see the decapitated head laying there, but the visual of her being knocked unconscious, like her plan being foiled by his head smacking right into her head, was just hilarious.
My God. Yeah, so funny.
Oh, that's the thing I was going to say, though, that is interesting about the rewatch as well, and maybe you'll have the same experience. For me, the first time around, I had my qualms. I'm like, oh man, is he going to be able to pull this off? I have issues with him. I'm afraid he's going to do some of the same things he's done too much of before. But then the film, I warm up to it pretty quickly. But then, of course, you're doing the whole game is like, oh, are they going to? And of course, me knowing the ending, I'm like, are they going to change the ending? Are they going to keep it the same? I'm so curious to see what they're going to do. But then just watching it as the film itself, going like, how do I read this scene? How do I read that scene? Just the dynamics between the characters and what their true intentions might be. So the usual thing. So there was comedy there, but I didn't really laugh that much except for the head thing, which cracked me up. But other than that, I really didn't laugh much the first time around. The second time around, in some of the bleakest moments of the film, there are some really hilarious visuals. But at the time, we just felt tragic. Where when he gives the antifreeze to his mother, and she dies, and he goes like running down the stairs, like no, 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 and then he's like frantically riding his bicycle straight into the camera, like Pee Wee Herman or something. I thought it was so funny. But it's so much more depressing now. The movie is actually funnier the second time around, and simultaneously, this is part of the reason I'm so impressed with it, simultaneously so much more depressing the second time around.
Yeah, wow. And he's still wearing his bee protection suit when he goes to that hospice. Yeah. Oh.
And he's just killed his friend, that guy who used to babysit him and apparently molested him.
Oh my God. I completely forgot about that. Yeah. And he keeps trying to apologize for it and move on.
He kills him with the bees, by the way. And by the way, just speaking of how these things are exactly the same, a police officer who is friends with like in the original film, just to talk about parallels for whatever reason at this point, that they are there. There's something that his friend comes by who has popped in a couple times before, checking in on him, did not rape him, just a guy who was friendly with him in the neighborhood and is a police officer as well, and accidentally discovers what's happening down there. And he also kills him with his bees. So yet another plot point. No history between them of rape, though.
Which was so well done. It's just snuck in there, and you can just see Jesse Plemons. He's got so much that he's working through for his whole life that there's no wonder that he falls into these conspiracy traps.
Those are the things that almost specifically crystallizes the thing that I think is so much better with this adaptation versus the original, is just adding that detail. It's not just that this guy, played very well, just a few scenes, but this guy's a stand-up comedian, this Stavros, who's also Greek, Stavros Halkias, I think his last name is, and that he plays this other guy who used to babysit him. But it's like he has this concern for him, and maybe it's still an attraction, and he can't admit it. So my point is that there's all this ambiguity about this relationship they had before, and how this has scarred the Jesse Plemons characters. Obviously, this traumatic thing that happened to him when he was a kid, and this is all part of the reason how he's been so broken, like you mentioned, but also what's happened to his mother, and all this additional context of his trauma that he had when he was younger makes him such a sympathetic character, even though he is this completely deformed by this. Obviously, he's a straight up terrorist, and now at this moment, and a conspiracy theorist. And then, of course, the irony of this turns out to be double irony. One is he's a kook, but apparently exactly correct. This is where I start thinking that the film is, obviously you could take it as satire, but it also is like so on the nose. The spaceship is exactly this 3D rendered version of the spaceship he has, just like a much more fancier CGI work. But it has the exact same design of what he imagined when he was rendering it on his laptop, which becomes, then I start wondering like, oh, is that too on the nose? Like, anyway, but I'll leave it at that for just a moment. But it is interesting to see like this, that they're playing with this, how much of this is real and how much of this is an imagination of it. But then, of course, he turns out to be 100% correct. Like that's where I was going with this. He's 100% correct about it. And yet it turns out that she was not actually trying to kill off all the human race, that this was an experiment. If we take everything, I think we're supposed to take everything literally true at the end, that this was an experiment to say, like, can we fix this species or do we have to just eliminate them? And she's just like, nope, it's the last failure. We just have to pull the plug. And there's some real sadness in her face there at the very end.
Super dark ending, yeah. I mean, you could say that everything after Jesse Plemons' character dies, everything
Right.
is his fantasy come true.
Right.
But yeah, I took it as they're going to turn their back on our world now. They were trying to save us, but it just didn't work, and now they're just going to turn their back rather than pull the plug. But
Well,
what a funny
they pop the
film.
atmosphere and they kill everybody, literally.
Is that right? Yeah, okay. All right. Well, then, so we all die and the bees die too.
No, the bees
At
survive. That's
the bees survive.
the very yeah.
Right.
So the very end, which I think is interesting, is that she seems to be very appreciative of the bees and saying that they're doing great despite the. That's a really interesting moment she has where he's saying that it's you guys and you're tampering with nature that is destroying the bees. And she's like, sometimes it just happens. Sometimes species just go away and sometimes they just come back again. Like maybe we're not actually doing all these things that you think we're doing, which is by the way, that's a lot of corporate speak too for people saying that like climate change isn't really happening either. So a lot of that could be read multiple ways and they want you to be uncomfortable with some of the ideas. Again, like Eddington, they want you to be uncomfortable with some of the ideas that are presented here by who do you argue is the correct or not. But of course, we got to talk about the end credits where after she pops the atmosphere, we see like boats careening through the ocean with corpses on them and the beach with all the sunbathers like now dead, people dying like during sex.
They're shocking images.
And expensive. I mean, they have like a whole highway pileup and stuff like that. I'm like, this is not a big budget movie. I'm like, I when I saw this the first time, I'm like, half the budget was all these shots, like where you have the whole manufacturing plants or the Amazon delivery with all the boxes piling up. These are, I mean, even if they just went to an Amazon warehouse and they said, hey, guys, let all the boxes pile up or whatever, just the coordination of these huge sets that they're using to do this. Or like I said, the car pile up on the highway. I'm like, that's not cheap to do. I'm like, and this is a inexpensive film. So I'm like, what did they spend half the budget on the credit sequence at the end?
Yeah, I thought that was a bit left field, all those images, to be honest. I thought they came from a different film. But yeah, I would much prefer to go while having sex. If there's a preference to all of those dying in a plane crash or a car crash. I think that couple went out the right way.
Exactly. And of course, we literally see the model of the Earth, right? When she punctures the atmosphere, it is a flat Earth, right? So all the conspiracies are true, right? All of them, even the flat Earth is true.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. I must admit, I did come away from this film much more excited than I did Eddington. The ending of Eddington, I was a bit down, but the ending of this film, even though it was a downer, I was, very thrilled.
I like how you're like, well, the Eddington, I'm not going to spoil the ending of anything, but like basically someone is trapped in a circumstance, let's say. And that's like, it is really bleak, right? But here it's like, you're like, but I was kind of uplifted by seeing everybody on Earth dead.
Yeah.
Oh, but the thing about the bees,
just...
but I was going to say that after you see all these people are dead, right? And then you see the flower, the same flower as we saw at the beginning of the film. And then we see the bees come and pollinate the flowers like they always do. So the bees are fine. And apparently that's all that really mattered. That's the only thing that actually mattered to these species.
That's all Jesse wanted from the beginning, wasn't it?
That's true, right? That's what he said. So I guess he gets what he wants. Yeah, a really interesting film. Yeah, I mean, I could nitpick here. I don't think, if you just read the film, what's shown on the screen, I don't think you can say that this is Jesse Plemons' fantasy of his come true because he blows up in that closet. So he's no longer POV, unless it's like a death dream of some kind in the moments before he dies. But I was thinking maybe, but I don't buy this either. I was saying, well, maybe it's when she gets hit in the head that this is like her, she's knocked out and this is what she's imagining. But then I think that the way they present her in the back of the ambulance running out, it's very literal. So it seems to be like this is supposed to be taken at face value. But then I ask, it just doesn't make sense. Like the rewatching the film, all the routine she has of maintaining her lifestyle and her cardio and the like really caught up in like whether people leave at 5 or 5:30 when they are planning to exterminate everybody on Earth. Maybe not this at the moment they decided to, but it's kind of the direction they're going for this whole entire time, right? So it seems to be like, would I spend all that? Like, why would she spend that? I'm being like very analytical about this character's choices, but I'm like, that's not how I would spend the last days on Earth if I was about to exterminate everybody on Earth. I wouldn't be concerned with making all the meetings and doing that advertisement, that commercial that they record.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I just felt that that's what the aliens had to do to survive on Earth, and they know the optimum way to survive is to exercise, take all your vitamins,
Right.
and perform at your best. But yeah, if she was my boss, I would not be leaving before 5 o'clock, even if I didn't have anything else to do.
What a great performance, though. I do want to shout out that again, that what a great performance she has, and that whole transformation she has from being the nice, polite, and again, of course, this is what they're exploring, this idea that this upper echelon of these incredibly powerful business that these business owners really are the people who run the world now, run the economy fully, and they have all the political power as well. And this whole play acting at being like, yeah, we're humans, we're nice, we don't want you to just, we want you to have time with your family, but really we don't. But we want to say those things so you think we're not such bad people. And we don't really want to be such bad people, but we really don't want you to go home early because we need you to make more money for us. And it's like that kind of double talk where she doesn't even see herself. I mean, if we ignore the is she really an alien or not, just that type of character is so specific and is such a like something that exists in the world right now. So it's very fun to see it satirized, all the corporate talk. But I love how he at first really has her number. Like when he starts saying like, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's have a meeting about it. Let's put it all out on a table. Like he's doing all the same kind of corporate jargon back at her. And at first he really seems to have gotten her, but she turns it all around on him. I love that moment where she turns the tables on him and she's like, you will never have me because you're a loser. And she's just like, that's like her real self coming out there at that moment.
Yeah, it was fascinating. Every time they would have their little meetings in the basement
Yeah.
when Jesse Plemons would go and see her, she would try a different tactic to get out of the situation she's in. So, yeah, from being friends with him to try to understand him to saying, this is how it's going to go. And yeah, ultimately just abusing him. It was great.
Yeah, his character name, by the way, is Teddy. I keep calling him, I forgot that, but it is a great character name, by the way. Teddy is such a great name.
Teddy.
I love it because you have like his cousin always saying like Teddy, like it's like a sweet Teddy sounding name. But then when she says it to Teddy, she's like trying to give him calling him Teddy and yet like trying to give him some kind of like it's an honorific or something. I like that moment when he like goes, "Oh, I didn't realize you were the actual related. You were in the to the emperor." And then he tries to be like, "This is as good as I can do for this like the pomp and circumstance of the moment." He can only make a bowl of pasta for her of spaghetti.
At
And
least
she
she
is
got a
very
seat
gracious
at the
about it, right?
table.
She's like, oh, thank you. Thank you. After being electrocuted in the basement. How about the moment when we find out that he has tortured and killed and dismembered many other people?
Well, that was when it was all almost all coming true, wasn't it? Where the inkling that I got that she was an actual alien, that was being sold to me when, yeah, all those bodies are there in the back cupboard and all his journals of what his experiments that he's done with them. Yeah, pretty. It reveals his character as to be extremely dark that you almost lose all sympathy for him.
And she asks him how many of them were actually aliens. And he says two. There's a lot more than two different heads and body parts back there, by the way. So he's killed a lot, tortured and killed a lot of people. And two of them were actual aliens, according to his own.
But he really revealed himself as a horrible person early on in the film when he chemically castrated his cousin, who really didn't want to be done that to be done to, but he trusted him. He trusted his cousin, and just it was just so shocking. I mean, he was so evil from the start.
I mean, I don't see it as it. I mean, it's a terrible thing to do, obviously, but I don't see it as necessarily him being calculating about it because I honestly think it has more to do with that his being molested at an earlier age, and that there's
Ah,
probably
interesting.
some he has very unresolved, I would assume, sexual issues, and he's kind of like removing them from the equation in a way.
I didn't think about it like that. Yeah, that's very dark, isn't it?
Yeah. And depressing. Like I said, the second time around, when you think about all these like individual character details, it is pretty sad.
But yeah, and it just goes back to the skill of filmmakers making a depressing movie super enjoyable and thrilling.
Yeah, and thrilling too. Like you said, like there are moments where you are really on the edge of your seat. Like, is she going to get out? What's he going to do next? It's just really, really well done. And yeah, so it just works as a thriller. A little bit of horror there, but not that much. But although some of the stuff is grotesque when it finally is revealed. And then yeah, and then just and such a dark comedy, like the head flying through the head through the air, just cracking me up. I just loved it. Second time around, I laughed again. It was just so crazy. I was like looking
Well,
forward to it.
very
I'm like, that head's gonna come pop out. I like how it's so just even the way it's done, just like that muted sound of the explosion inside the closet and the head just firing out of there like a cannonball. It's just incredible.
and it just looked like an accident, the way that it perfectly hits
Yeah.
her in the head. It just looked like
Yes.
it was a
Exactly.
stunt gone wrong.
Yes.
Well,
Direct
very
contact.
interested to see where this falls in your list of best movies of the year. But yeah, very interested to see what else you got on that list. And yeah, I wonder if I've seen most of them, or if not all of them, or none of them at
I think
this
I mean
strange time of year.
yes, yes. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things that probably haven't. A lot of stuff on my list higher up is. I mean, I want to shout it out. So a lot of the stuff on there is pretty small, even smaller than Bugonia, which was not like a huge film. But so I have a lot of those. A lot of like the bigger films that we've probably seen the more entertaining blockbuster films are not in my top 20. So, but yeah, so I think you've probably seen a good number of the ones I have on there. So anyway, you'll know soon enough when I publish the episode.
Excellent. I'm sure there'll be some discoveries on there. I've been listening to a few different podcasts, and so I've got a long list of movies I need to catch up on.
All right, great. All right, Darren, thank you again for the conversation. We will regroup next week and we'll be talking about industry and can't wait for that as well.
Can't wait. Great. Thanks so much, Victor. Been a
All right,
pleasure.
Darren.